There is an episode of The Amazing World of Gumball where Gumball and Darwin slip through a tear in their own town and end up in a place the show simply calls the Void. It is a soft, milky, infinite white nothing, and it is where the universe of Elmore quietly puts its mistakes. The characters that did not work. The designs the animators gave up on. The friend the writers forgot to write back into a single other episode. A boy who lives there because nobody at the studio could be bothered to draw his legs. A girl who lives there because nobody at the studio could be bothered to remember her at all. That premise aired on a children's network in the middle of a Saturday morning, slipped past most parents, slipped past most kids, and almost nobody on the outside ever quite registered what the amazing world of Gumball had just done. Tonight we are going back through it, slowly and at length. Every place where this show, the one your little brother watched, was quietly one of the bleakest cartoons on television. So get comfortable, turn the lights down, and if you have not subscribed to Cortoon yet, it really does help us keep making these. Settle in, we will be here a while. So let us begin where most people do not, which is inside the Void itself, because that one episode is the cleanest single example of what this show keeps doing to you when you are not looking. The Void, as a place, is introduced almost casually. Gumball and Darwin notice that a character named Molly, a small green dinosaur girl they have known since the very first season, has stopped appearing at school. Nobody else seems to notice. The teacher does not call her name on the register. Her chair is empty and no one wonders out loud where she might be. Gumball and Darwin only catch it because they happen to look, and once they look, the show begins to peel back something it has been very quietly hinting at for years, which is that the world of Elmore is not stable. It has cracks. There are things behind the wallpaper, and on the other side of those cracks is the Void. When they actually go there, what they find is one of the most unsettling images this show ever put on screen. And it is unsettling precisely because it is so soft. The Void is not hellish. It is not dark or burning or full of monsters. It is bright, almost beautiful, and absolutely empty. And the people who live there are aware they are there. They are aware that the rest of Elmore is going on without them. Molly's father, a friendly-looking creature who walks on what would be feet if the animators had ever finished his model, explains it to the boys in the calm tone of someone who has accepted his situation. He is here because his design was incomplete. He is here because somewhere in the writing of the show, someone made a decision that he was not worth finishing. He does not blame anyone. He just lives there now, in the white. Then they meet Rob, and Rob is where this whole idea curdles, because Rob is no longer calm about it. Rob is a small, pink, one-eyed creature who Gumball and Darwin actually do remember. They have seen him before. They saw him in passing, in a single scene, in an earlier episode, and they never thought about him again, and the universe of the show registered that and threw him away. Rob has been alone in the Void for what feels to him like a very long time. He has been clawing at the seams of reality, trying to get out, and nobody noticed because nobody was looking for him. And when Gumball and Darwin finally do see him and recognize him, his first instinct is hope. He thinks they have come to rescue him. He thinks they have come because they remembered. They have not. They are there by accident, and once they realize where they are, they leave him behind. They leave him in the white, the way the show left him in the white, the way the writers left him in the white, and Rob is forced to watch the door close. The next time he appears, he is the villain. He hates Gumball with a quiet, focused, completely justified hatred, and he spends multiple later episodes trying to ruin Gumball's life specifically because Gumball had the audacity to forget him. He cannot let it go because nobody else can be made to remember what happened to him. He is the only one who knows. He is, in a way, the closest thing this show has to a real antagonist, and his entire motivation is being a discarded thought. Sit with that for a moment, because it gets darker the longer you sit with it. The villain of the amazing world of Gumball is a character who is angry that he was written badly. He is a piece of media that became conscious of being a piece of media, and conscious that the people in charge of him did not care if he existed or not. He cannot kill Gumball. He cannot do anything that would actually be allowed on a children's network, but the show keeps bringing him back, and every time it brings him back, he has slipped a little further. He has stolen things. He has tampered with timelines. In one of his later appearances, he changes the entire color palette of Elmore, sucks the warmth out of the town and leaves it in shades of gray, and the show plays it for laughs even as it tells you, in plain text, that this is what a forgotten character does when he finally figures out how the universe works. He starts to bend it, he starts to ruin it, and nobody can quite stop him, because nobody can quite remember why he is so angry in the first place. The void is presented in a single episode, but its implications quietly haunt the rest of the series. Once you know that this is where Elmore puts its mistakes, you cannot watch the show the same way again. Every time a background character has a single line and then never appears in another episode, you find yourself wondering. Every time the camera lingers on a face in a crowd you have never seen before, you find yourself thinking about the white. The show is essentially admitting, out loud, that it has a graveyard, that the cost of writing a series this dense, this packed with one-off characters and visual gags, is that most of the people in those gags are functionally dead inside the world of the show. They had a single shining moment, and then the writers turned the page and they were gone, and somewhere in the basement of the universe of Elmore is a softly lit white room full of all of them, waiting to find out why nobody ever came back. The reason this premise lands as hard as it does is that the show plays it so gently. There is no scary music when they enter the void. The lighting does not change. There are no ominous shadows. The most disturbing thing in the void is how nice it looks, how peaceful it sounds, how reasonable everyone there is about the situation. Molly's father is not screaming, he is not pleading, he is just there, in the calm, and he is going to be there forever. And when Gumball and Darwin leave, the camera does not linger on his face, it cuts away. The episode ends, and the universe of Elmore reabsorbs the boys and pretends none of it happened, and the show goes on for several more seasons with that small, deeply uncomfortable piece of knowledge buried inside it, waiting for anyone watching closely enough to notice it. This is the trick the show pulls over and over, and it is the trick we are going to be unpacking, slowly, for the rest of tonight. It will hand you something genuinely horrifying, dressed in pastel colors, scored with a friendly little jingle, voiced by a character with a happy expression, and it will trust you to either laugh and move on, or to look at it closely and realize what you are actually looking at. Most people laugh and move on. That is fine. That is what the show is built to allow. But if you do start looking closely, you will find that this is not a colorful cartoon with a few dark jokes hidden inside it. It is a deeply melancholy show with a colorful cartoon painted on top, and the melancholy bleeds through almost every episode if you let your eyes adjust to it. Once your eyes do adjust, you start to see it in the most ordinary places. You start to see it in the house the family lives in. You start to see it in the way the mother holds herself when she comes home from work. You start to see it in the way the father, a grown man, behaves like a child in every single scene. You start to see it in the youngest daughter's expression when she looks at her family and clearly understands something nobody else in the room is willing to understand. The void is the spectacular version of the show's darkness. The household is the everyday version. And the everyday version is, in some ways, worse, because it never goes away. It is the background hum of the entire series. So that is where we are going next. Out of the white room and into the small pink house on the unremarkable street, where the Wattersons are doing their best, and where their best is not enough, and where the show is very quietly honest about that fact in almost every episode. The house itself is the easiest place to start, because the show keeps showing it to you and you keep not noticing it. The Wattersons live in a small 2-story house painted a soft pink, on a quiet street in a quiet suburb of a town that, the more you look at it, becomes increasingly clear, is not doing well economically. They have a yard, they have a car, they have furniture. From the outside, it looks like the standard sitcom family home, the kind of place you stop registering as a setting because every cartoon has one. But the show is very careful about what it shows you inside that house. And what it shows you, again and again, is a family that is one bad week away from losing all of it. Money is a running theme in the amazing world of Gumball from very early on, and the show is unusually frank about it for a children's cartoon. There are entire episodes built around the family being unable to pay a bill. There are entire episodes built around the mother taking on extra hours because the father has done something foolish with the budget. There are entire episodes built around the boys trying to make money in increasingly desperate ways to cover something the parents cannot. The plots are played for laughs. The premise is not. The premise is a family living paycheck to paycheck, with a single working adult, a partner who does not work, and 3 children who have to navigate the gap between the life they would like to have and the life that is actually on offer. Watch the show with that in mind and the house starts to look different. The walls are bare in the rooms where the camera is not pointed at a gag. The furniture is the same furniture, episode after episode, never replaced, increasingly worn. The fridge, when they open it, often contains very little. The boys share a bedroom, and not for cuteness. The youngest child, Anais, has her own room that is functionally a closet. The bathroom is the only one in the house, and the show has built running jokes out of how that single bathroom is fought over. None of this is treated as tragedy. It is treated as the normal, ambient texture of the family's life, and that is what makes it sting when you notice it. The show is not crying poor. It is just quietly, accurately depicting a family that does not have much, and trusting you not to require the situation to be underlined. The mother is the spine of all of it. Nicole Watterson is a cat, blue-furred, sharp-featured, and she is the only adult in the house who actually functions as an adult. She has a job at a rainbow factory. We see that job over the course of the series, and the show is not coy about it. It is a soul-destroying place. Her boss is a tyrant. Her work has no obvious meaning. She comes home most evenings depleted, walks into a house that has often been wrecked in her absence by her husband and her sons, and is expected to put the house back together and feed everyone, and resolve whatever crisis is in progress before the day ends. She does this every episode without complaint, until the moment she snaps, and the moments where Nicole snaps are some of the most genuinely frightening sequences in the entire show. There is an episode early in the series in which Nicole completely loses control of her own emotions. It is played for comedy. She turns red, she grows. She becomes a kind of feral, gigantic version of herself, all teeth and claws and rage, and she tears through the situation that has provoked her, and then she comes back down and apologizes, and the episode ends with the family hugging and the moral neatly delivered. That sequence is presented as a single bad day, but the show keeps returning to that version of Nicole, and the longer the show runs, the clearer it becomes that the rage is not a single bad day. The rage is what is underneath the entire performance of her life. She is a person who has trained herself, over years, to hold an enormous amount of pressure in, and the pressure has nowhere to go, and every so often it finds an outlet, and the outlet is terrifying. The show makes a running gag out of it. The show is also being very, very honest about what it costs a person to be the only one in a household holding everything together. If you watch enough Nicole episodes back to back, the pattern becomes hard to laugh off. She is not allowed a hobby that lasts. She has a backstory, sketched in flashbacks across several seasons, that is genuinely sad. Her own parents are presented as cold, demanding, and emotionally withholding. They wanted her to be a great fighter, a champion of a particular martial discipline, and she walked away from that life to be with Richard, who they consider beneath her, and they have never forgiven her for it. We meet them, in episodes scattered through the series, and they are not warm. They do not soften. They look at the life their daughter has built and they radiate disappointment. And Nicole carries that disappointment with her in every interaction she has with her own children, where she is trying very hard not to be the parents who hurt her. She is mostly succeeding, mostly. And the moments where she fails are the moments where the show lets a flash of her parents' coldness show through her own face. And you can see, without anyone having to say it, that she is aware she is doing it. The father is the other half of the equation, and the father is where the show's darkness gets, in some ways, the most uncomfortable. Richard Watterson is a tall, pink-furred rabbit creature, sweet-natured, well-meaning, and functionally a child. He does not work. He cannot hold a job. The show has tried, repeatedly, to put him in a job, and the running gag is that any environment that puts an adult expectation on him causes the universe itself to react badly. The jokes treat his uselessness as charming. The show, in its quieter moments, treats it as something else. Nicole is not married to a partner. Nicole is married to a fourth child. Richard does not understand the bills. Richard does not understand the consequences of his decisions. Richard creates a crisis in many episodes simply by being left alone for an afternoon, and Nicole has to come home from her job to clean it up, and Richard apologizes in the moment and then does it again the following week, because that is who he is, and the show is honest enough to admit that people like him do not really change. There is an entire episode in a later season built around Richard finally going back to school, finally trying to better himself, finally taking responsibility for the years of drift, and it is a genuinely moving sequence for as long as it lasts. He works hard, he studies, he earns his place, he graduates, and the universe of the show, with very deliberate cruelty, deposits him right back into the same chair, in the same living room, in the same house, watching the same television, because the system around him does not actually have anywhere for a man who tried late to grow up. The show frames it as comedy. It is also, very clearly, a statement about what it is like to be an adult who has missed every window for becoming the version of yourself you wanted to be. Richard is genuinely sweet, genuinely loves his family, and genuinely cannot be the partner that his wife needs him to be. And everyone in the house has quietly accepted this and built their lives around it. The youngest child is the one who sees it all the most clearly. Anais Watterson is a small pink rabbit, 4 years old at the start of the series, and she is the smartest member of the family by a substantial margin. The running joke is that she is a child genius. The running tragedy is what that child genius is for. Anais spends most of her screen time being the only person in any given room who fully understands the situation that the family is in, and the show keeps cutting to her face during scenes where the others are oblivious. She watches Richard make a financial decision that will hurt them. She watches Gumball and Darwin set in motion the chain of events that will lead to a disaster. She watches Nicole, exhausted, accept a thing she should not have to accept. And Anais's expression in these moments is something the writers and animators have clearly thought about carefully. It is not the face of a 4-year-old. It is the face of a small person who is having to be the adult that the adults in her life cannot be, and who has known for some time that nobody else is coming. She is also, by some distance, the family member with the fewest friends. Gumball and Darwin have each other and a wide social circle. Nicole has her work colleagues, however awful that workplace is. Richard has his television and his food. Anais has, as a recurring presence, a stuffed rabbit. The show has done multiple episodes about her loneliness. She is too young for the kids her own age, who do not understand her, and too smart for the kids her own intellectual level, who are years older than she is and have nothing to do with her. She is stranded in between, in her small bedroom, in a family that does not really know how to talk to her, and the show keeps showing you that and trusting you to feel it. When Anais does get a friend in an episode, it almost always ends with the friend leaving, or with Anais discovering that the friend was not really a friend, and she retreats back into her own small world, and the show closes the episode on her doing so. That is darker than anything in the void. That is the slow, ongoing version of being forgotten. And then there is the middle child, the goldfish. The one almost nobody outside the show really registers as strange. Darwin is the family's adopted son. He was originally Gumball's pet goldfish. He developed legs at some point in his childhood, became sentient, and was absorbed into the family as a son and as Gumball's closest friend. The show treats this premise with a remarkably straight face. It does not really dwell on the existential implications. It just lets Darwin exist as a small, eager, sweet-natured fish boy who loves his family and his brother and his life. But the moments when the show does dwell on the implications are stark. There is an episode in which Darwin tries to reconnect with his fish family, the family he had before he was adopted, and the reconnection does not go well because he is no longer the kind of creature he was. He has grown into something that his original family cannot quite recognize. He cannot go back. There is no road back. He belongs with the Wattersons now, because the Wattersons are what he is, and there is something quietly devastating about a child watching that and understanding that this is what happens when you grow. The show also, in the quieter background of the series, never quite lets you forget that Darwin's existence began with a small act of cruelty. The previous fish, the fish Darwin replaced, had to die for Darwin to begin. The Wattersons had goldfish before Darwin, and those goldfish are gone, and there is one episode in which the show, with a small grim smile, lets you visit the ghosts of those fish. They are present. They remember being flushed. They remember being forgotten. The episode plays it for laughs, and the laughs are real. But underneath the laughs is the same admission the void makes more explicitly later. This family has a history of disposable people, and the disposable people are aware of having been disposed of, and the show is not going to let you forget it just because Darwin is sweet. So the house, the family, the daily texture of the show, all of it is built on a foundation of quiet, ongoing dysfunction. A mother who is past the edge of what she can carry, a father who cannot grow up, a daughter who has to be older than she is, a son who has replaced someone. A blue cat in the middle of all of it, the title character, who is going to be the next thing we look at, and who is, in many ways, the most complicated piece of darkness this show contains, because he is the part of the show that knows you are watching. Gumball Watterson is, on the surface, the easiest character on this show to dismiss as light. He is 12 years old, he is a small blue cat, he has an enormous expressive face and an enormous expressive voice, and the show frames him as the protagonist of a children's comedy in the most straightforward way. He gets into trouble, he gets out of trouble, he learns lessons, he forgets the lessons, he goes to school, he chases his crush, he hangs out with his brother, he cracks jokes. If you watched the show for the first time and only watched a handful of random episodes, you would walk away thinking Gumball is essentially a nice, dumb, slightly chaotic kid, the way the protagonist of any cartoon is essentially a nice, dumb, slightly chaotic kid. That is the surface. Underneath the surface, Gumball is one of the most unpleasant lead characters a children's cartoon has ever centered a series on, and the show is very, very aware of that. He is selfish, he is vain, he is, in the truest sense of the word, cruel. He weaponizes Darwin's loyalty against Darwin in episode after episode, sending the fish to do the things he himself does not want to do, putting Darwin in danger he would not put himself in, and then pulling rank as the older brother when Darwin pushes back. He lies casually and constantly. He builds entire episodes on deception that he then has to maintain through escalating bad choices. He punishes characters who have done him minor wrongs with grossly disproportionate responses. He humiliates people. He humiliates himself, often, but he humiliates other people first. And the show, crucially, does not let him off for any of it. The show is very clear that this is who Gumball is. He is the bad influence on his own life. Most of the disasters in any given episode are disasters of Gumball's making, and most of the time the resolution involves Gumball, with great reluctance, admitting that this is true. There is a long arc that runs through the middle seasons of the show in which Gumball's selfishness has consequences that the show takes seriously. The arc with Rob, the character from The Void, is the longest example. Rob exists as a villain in the show specifically because Gumball failed him on a basic moral level. Gumball saw him, recognized him, and walked away. The episodes that follow do not let Gumball forget that. Rob keeps coming back. Rob keeps reminding Gumball that he is the reason for Rob's suffering, and Gumball, episode after episode, cannot quite figure out how to actually make it right. The most he can manage is to defeat Rob temporarily, to push Rob back into whatever corner of the show Rob has been pushed into, and the next time the show needs him, Rob is there again. And Gumball, again, has done nothing to fix the underlying problem. The show is telling you something about the kind of person Gumball is. He does not actually have the capacity to repair what he has broken. He can only outlast it. There is also the small, ongoing matter of how Gumball treats the world around him. He talks to objects as if they were beneath him, and the objects in his world are, in fact, alive. There is an episode in which the boys have to confront the fact that the trash they have thrown out is sentient, that the appliances they have abused are sentient, that the food they have wasted is sentient, and the moral dimension of every casual act of carelessness in Gumball's life becomes briefly visible. The episode is a comedy. It is also a horror story. The implication, never quite stated out loud, is that Gumball lives in a universe where everything is alive and aware, and he has spent his life treating most of it like garbage. And one day all of the things he has been careless with may very well come for him. The show plays it as a single episode gag. The implications carry forward into every other episode and never quite go away. The most disturbing thing about Gumball as a character, though, is the way the show frames his awareness. He knows he is in a show. He knows, in multiple late-season episodes, that there is a camera, that there is an audience, that the universe he lives in is being observed. He talks to the camera. He references his own animation style. He references the rules of the show out loud. He uses the medium itself as a tool inside the plot of the show, manipulating his own visual style to escape danger, manipulating the sound design to drown out characters he does not want to hear, manipulating the rules of editing to get out of consequences he would otherwise have to face. This is funny. The way the show executes it is brilliant. It is also, on a level the show is happy for you to ignore, a very lonely portrait of a small person who has worked out that he is not real and who has decided to use that knowledge to survive. The character is built on a kind of restless self-awareness that the show keeps shading darker over time. In the early seasons, the meta-jokes are loose and fun. In the later seasons, they get more pointed. Gumball begins to seem genuinely troubled by his own situation. He begins to chafe against the limits of his world. He begins to act out, sometimes spectacularly, against the way his own show is structured. The show keeps letting him do this, and the show keeps letting him fail at it, because every attempt to escape the format ends with him being placed back into the format, and the next episode begins as if nothing has happened. He is the only one in his world who is fully aware that his world is a world, and the only thing he can do with that awareness is keep being a small selfish blue cat in a small selfish blue cat story, and the show is happy to admit, in its quieter moments, that this is itself a kind of trap. You can read his pursuit of Penny, his classmate and his crush, in this light. Gumball has loved Penny since the first episode of the show. The show has built one of its longest-running and best-executed romantic arcs around that love. He moons over her. He humiliates himself for her. He builds elaborate plans to impress her. He grows, over the course of the show, into something like a real partner for her. But underneath that arc, the show keeps quietly noting that this is also one of the few things in Gumball's life that is not a joke. It is the only place he is sincere. Everything else is a performance. Everything else is a defense mechanism. Penny is the one part of his life he is not willing to be glib about, and the show is honest enough about that to make his sincerity feel like a small miracle every time it shows up. The character is essentially defending one small space inside himself from the rest of his own life, and the rest of his own life keeps trying to get in. That sincerity, when it does break through, is what saves Gumball from being unbearable. He is, in spite of all of the above, capable of love. He loves his brother. He loves his sister, in his own awkward way. He loves his parents. He loves Penny. And the show, when it wants to, can produce moments of plain, unironic warmth between him and any of those characters that are some of the most affecting sequences in the entire series. But the show is also careful to keep those moments rare. They land because they are rare. The default state of Gumball is glib, defensive, restless, scheming, anxious, casually cruel, and the show is honest that this is the default. The warmth is the exception. The warmth is what he is capable of when he stops being himself for a moment, and the show keeps letting him slide back into himself the instant the moment is over, because that is how a character like Gumball actually behaves. He is not going to be reformed. He is going to keep being the person he is, and the people around him are going to keep loving him anyway, and the show is going to keep being honest about how exhausting that is. What this means for the larger argument is that Gumball is, in a real sense, the engine of the show's quiet darkness. Every cruel system in his town affects him because he keeps walking into it, and most of the cruel systems in his town are, in fact, set in motion by him. The school suffers him, his family suffers him, his friends suffer him, Penny survives him, and the show, with great patience, lets you watch a small blue cat slowly become aware of the cost of being himself, and then lets him do nothing about it, because the show is not interested in the easy lie of a character who simply learns. The show is interested in the harder honesty of a character who learns and then forgets and then learns again and never quite holds on to it. And that, more than the void, more than the household, more than anything else this show contains, is what makes the show's darkness so persistent. The lead character is not going to grow out of it. None of them are. That is the deal. And once you accept that the lead is not going to grow out of it, you start to notice how the show keeps holding up other small mirrors to him in the form of the people around him. His best friend, his crush, his sister, his teachers, his neighbors. Each of them is, in their own way, a version of a small life that has decided to settle for what it has. Some of them have settled for less than Gumball. Some of them have settled for more. But none of them are getting out of Elmore. That is, in the end, the deepest and quietest piece of darkness in the show. Nobody leaves, nothing escapes. Whatever is in this town stays in this town, and the next chapter is going to start with the place that holds most of these characters most of the day, which is the school. Elmore Junior High is the second main location of the show, and once you start paying attention to the way the show talks about it, the school becomes almost as ominous as the void. On the surface, it is a standard cartoon junior high. There are lockers, there is a cafeteria, there is a gym, there is a principal's office. There are teachers and pupils and the standard daily rituals of getting from one class to another. But the people running it are openly, undisguisedly bad at their jobs, and the show keeps showing you that they are bad at their jobs, and it keeps trusting you to register what it means that the children of this town are spending most of their waking lives in this building. The teacher the show spends the most time with is Miss Simeon. She is, in the literal sense, a baboon, and she is, in every other sense, a kind of casual nightmare. She does not like children. She does not pretend to like children. She has been a teacher, the show implies, for an extraordinarily long time, possibly thousands of years, and she has reached a point at which the entire purpose of her teaching career is to harm the specific child she is currently teaching, which for most of the run of the show is Gumball. She does not teach Gumball anything. She actively works to keep him stupid, because she has decided, in her own mind, that he deserves to be kept stupid, and because keeping him stupid amuses her. The show plays this for big, broad jokes. The show is also showing you, in plain text, a child trapped in a classroom with an adult who has decided she is his enemy. Most of the children in the show are trapped in that same classroom. Most of the children in the show have her as their primary educator. Most of the children in the show are getting no real education from her at all. The principal, Principal Brown, is also a baboon, and he is in a long-term romantic relationship with Miss Simeon, a fact the show spends multiple episodes elaborating in increasingly uncomfortable detail. He is supposed to be the adult who oversees the building, who makes sure the school functions, who responds to the regular crises that occur on his watch. He does not really do any of this. He is mostly preoccupied with his own life, his own romance, his own appearances, and the school runs on autopilot around him. When something does go visibly wrong, his first instinct is to cover it up or to blame a child. He has, multiple times in the series, sided against children in disputes where the children were obviously in the right. He has, multiple times in the series, used the resources of the school for his own purposes. He has, multiple times in the series, been visibly absent at moments when the children needed an adult. The show plays this for laughs. The show is also showing you a school where the person in charge is not in charge, and where the children are running on the assumption that no help is coming. The counselor, a small floating creature called Mr. Small, is the closest thing the school has to a mental health resource for the children. And the show makes a long-running joke out of how thoroughly inadequate he is. He is sincere, he cares, he genuinely wants to help. He is also, openly, a person whose grip on reality is loose at best. His advice is bad. His coping techniques are baroque and ineffective. His office is full of crystals and dream catchers and incense, and the children who go to him for help leave more confused than they arrived. The show is gentle with him because he is sweet, but the show is also clear that he is what passes for emotional support in this building, and that the children of Elmore are essentially navigating their own emotional lives without any meaningful adult guidance. They have a counselor in name only. They have a principal in name only. They have a teacher in name only. They are, in every meaningful sense, on their own, and they are 11 and 12 years old. The student body is its own kind of horror, not because the children are bad, but because of who the children are and what they are dealing with. Tobias is a small rainbow-colored cloud creature, and his parents are wealthy, neglectful, vain, and visibly unhappy with him. The show has done multiple episodes about Tobias's home life, and his home life is bleak in a quiet, recognizable way. He is the child of parents who do not see him, who do not have time for him, who would rather he be elsewhere. Banana Joe is a banana, which is in itself a small running joke, but the show keeps coming back to the fact that Joe's father is the same banana, and that his entire identity has been preformed by a parent who refuses to allow him to be anything other than the family joke. Tina Rex is a Tyrannosaurus, vast and intimidating and feared in the school, and the show has revealed that her father is even larger and angrier than she is, and that her aggression is, very transparently, a learned defense against a father who treats her with constant intimidation. The show has done an episode in which Tina, the school bully, cries openly about what it is like to be her, and the children who have feared her for the whole series are forced to confront the fact that her cruelty has been a defense the whole time. That episode is a comedy. That episode is also one of the more sympathetic portraits of a frightened child this kind of show has ever attempted. Sussy is a character the show keeps in the background most of the time, a strange little creature with a real human chin, used as the lower half of her face, and her presence on the show is essentially a sustained low-level surrealism. She is happy, mostly. She has friends. She is part of the social fabric of the school. But what the show keeps quietly noting is that nobody in her life ever quite figures out what to do with her, that she is, in some ways, the most cosmically unfortunate child in the school, and that her response to being cosmically unfortunate is to be relentlessly, almost unsettlingly cheerful about it. The show treats her with affection. The show also treats her as a small, ongoing reminder that the children in this school are dealing with situations the adults in their lives are not equipped to even acknowledge. There is also the running detail of the school's other staff. The lunch lady, the various substitute teachers, the gym coach, the bus driver. Almost all of them are presented as variations on the same theme, which is that the adults of Elmore who have ended up in service positions are, almost without exception, miserable. They do not like their work. They do not like the children. They do not like each other. The show plays each of them for individual jokes, and the individual jokes are funny. The cumulative effect is a portrait of an institution that has long since stopped functioning as an institution and is now just a building where unhappy adults and unsupervised children pass each other in hallways for several hours a day before going home. The town's relationship with the school is its own quiet piece of darkness. The parents, in the episodes that show them, do not really engage with the school. They send their children there because that is what one does. They show up for parent-teacher conferences, and the conferences are uniformly disastrous, often because the teacher does not actually have anything useful to say about the child in question. They show up for performances, and the performances are uniformly chaotic. They show up for emergencies, and the emergencies are usually made worse by their presence. The school is something the town has built to put its children inside during the day, and the town has stopped really looking at what happens inside that building, and the children have, in turn, stopped really expecting anything good from the building. This matters because most of the show takes place there. The school is the central social space of the children's world. The school is where they meet their friends, fight their enemies, find their crushes, learn their lessons, build their identities. And the show is very clear about what that means. The world that is shaping these children is, structurally, a world that does not really care if they thrive. They are going to come out of this school the way the adults of Elmore came out of whatever school they went to, which is to say with the same defenses, the same compromises, the same disappointments, and the same quietly diminished horizons. The show is not interested in the easy lie of a school as a place that builds people up. It is interested in the harder honesty of a school as a place that mostly just holds people in place until they are old enough to be held in place somewhere else. Inside that building, on most days, sit two characters whose story is genuinely lovely, and whose story is also a small lit candle inside a much larger dark room. Gumball and Penny. And Penny is where the show's darkness gets, for a long stretch of the middle seasons, the most visually startling. Because Penny is not, as it turns out, what you have spent the first part of the show thinking she is. Penny has been hiding herself, from her family, from her friends, from Gumball, from herself, and from the audience, for the entire opening run of the series. And the moment the show finally lets her out of that hiding is one of the most unsettling and one of the most beautiful sequences this show ever produced. Penny Fitzgerald, in the first few seasons of the show, looks like a small peanut-shaped creature, beige, with two large antlers, a sweet face, a cheerleader's uniform, and a warm relationship with Gumball that the show develops slowly across dozens of episodes. The audience accepts her for what she appears to be. Gumball accepts her for what she appears to be. Her family is presented as a family in the same shape. Her father, in particular, is an enormous, terrifying, perpetually angry figure who hates Gumball, who guards Penny aggressively, who is one of the few adults in the show who is positioned as an outright threat to a child character. For a long time, this is all you know about Penny. She is a small antlered girl in a small antlered family with a father who scares Gumball. Then the show, in a single episode in its later run, opens the shell. And the shell turns out to have been hiding something the show has been signposting for years without ever quite confirming. Penny is, by most accounts, a shape-shifting fairy, a creature whose family has, for generations, lived inside hard outer shells that hide their true forms. And the shell she has been wearing for the entire show has been a kind of skin she was trained from childhood to keep on at all times. Her father wears one, her sister wears one, the whole extended family wears one. The shells are not for protection. The shells are for compliance. They are the result of a family rule, enforced by the father, that says the family's true shape is not safe to show to the world, and that to remove the shell is to invite rejection, ridicule, danger. The episode in which Penny finally cracks her shell is one of the most beautifully animated sequences this show ever attempted, and one of the most quietly painful. She is alone with Gumball. She tells him that she has wanted, for a long time, to let him see her actually. She breaks the shell, and what is underneath is not the small antlered creature he expected at all. She is, briefly, every shape she has ever wanted to be. She is a deer. She is a butterfly. She is a wolf. She is a flame. She is a series of forms the show has clearly worked very hard to design, and each one is its own small expression of a part of her that she has been keeping locked inside the shell for years. Gumball watches this in silence. He has been preparing to be supportive, to perform whichever reaction Penny needed from him, and what he actually does when he sees her is be amazed. He thinks she is incredible. He tells her so. He means it. That moment is, on one level, one of the great love scenes in this show, and one of the great love scenes in any cartoon. It is generous, it is patient, it is honest, and it earns every second of itself. It is also, on a level the show is happy to leave underneath, one of the most explicit metaphors for hiding the self that a children's show has ever put on screen. Penny has been trained by a father who is loud and angry and frightened to keep a hard shell over what she actually is, on the grounds that what she actually is would not be acceptable to anyone outside the family. She has carried that shell for her whole life. It has not just hidden her from other people. It has hidden her from herself. She does not, when she first breaks out, fully know what she even is. She has to discover it in front of Gumball, in real time, with no preparation. The shapes she becomes are not rehearsed. She has not had a chance to rehearse them. The family rule was strict enough that she has never been able to find out who she would be without it. The show is very careful about how it handles her father after this. He does not, in the next episode, become a softened or apologetic figure. He continues to be loud and angry and frightened. He continues to fight against the changes in his daughter. He has spent his entire life believing that the shell is the only thing keeping his family safe, and the fact that his daughter has chosen, on her own, to discard it strikes him as a personal betrayal and as a danger to her. There is an arc in the later seasons in which Penny tries to bring her father to see what she has become, and her father reacts badly, and the relationship between them goes through a long, slow, painful repair that is never fully completed in the run of the show. He is, by the end of the series, somewhere closer to acceptance than he was at the beginning. He is not all the way there. The show is honest about that. Some parents do not get all the way there. Some parents make it most of the way and then stop, and their children have to live with that. What is striking, on rewatch, is how clearly the show seeded all of this. Penny's father is loud and angry from his very first appearance. He is always positioned as someone who is afraid of something, even if you cannot at first tell what. He warns Gumball off her, again and again, with a force that is disproportionate to what is actually happening between the two children. He is, very plainly, a man who has built his entire emotional life around a single rule, and who reacts to any threat to that rule the way a person reacts to a threat to their life. The show makes him funny. The show also makes it possible, in retrospect, to feel a real sting of sympathy for him, because the reason he is the way he is that he believes, with everything he has, that the alternative would destroy his daughter. He is wrong. The destruction was the shell. But the show is honest enough to let him be wrong out of love rather than out of cruelty. Penny's transformation is one of the most overtly hopeful arcs in the show. It is also, in its way, one of the darkest, because the show is very clear about what the shell cost her before she got out of it. She has spent her childhood being a shape that was not hers. She has spent her childhood performing a self that was not the self underneath. She has spent her childhood, at her father's insistence, learning to be afraid of her own form. The fact that she gets out, eventually, with the help of a small, devoted blue cat who happens to love her exactly as she is, does not erase the years she spent trapped. It just gives her a place to start from, and the show, when it lets her have her transformation scenes in later episodes, keeps showing you, very gently, that she is still learning. She still surprises herself with the shapes she becomes. She still has to figure out, in real time, who she is without the shell. The work is not finished, it is just begun. The Penny arc is one of the cleanest examples of the show using a piece of broad cartoon premise to tell a very specific and very recognizable story about a real human experience. The cheerleader in the antlered shell is, when you slow it all down, a child raised in a family of strict rules about who she is allowed to be, in a town where almost nobody else is being honest about what they are either, falling in love with a chaotic boy who happens to love her in the form she is most afraid of being. The dark part is the years of hiding. The light part is the moment she stops. The show holds both at the same time and trusts you to feel them at once. And the fact that it does this inside the body of a children's comedy about a blue cat is, in a quiet way, an enormous achievement. But Penny is one of the lucky ones. Most of the children in this town do not get to find their actual shape. Most of them stay in the shell their family put them in. Most of them stay in the school that does not really teach them. Most of them stay in the town that does not really see them. Most of them end up in the position the adults of Elmore are in by the time the show meets them, which is to say living small lives in small houses in a small place, having long since stopped looking for the form underneath the shell. And one of those adults, one of the side characters the show spends a surprising amount of time with, is Mr. Robinson, the next-door neighbor, who hates Gumball, who hates his own life, and who is one of the most quietly devastating characters this show ever wrote. Mr. Robinson is, on the page, a recurring background gag. He is a small, irritable creature who lives in the house directly next to the Wattersons, and his function in most episodes is to be annoyed by the Wattersons. He is annoyed by the noise. He is annoyed by Gumball. He is annoyed by Darwin. He is annoyed by the dog. He is annoyed by Richard. He spends the majority of his appearances yelling at things from his front lawn. He is, in cartoon terms, the grumpy neighbor archetype, and you could be forgiven for never thinking about him beyond that. But the show, very early on, makes a small and very deliberate decision about Mr. Robinson, which is that it is going to occasionally let you look inside his house. And once you have looked inside his house, you cannot stop seeing what is in there. Mr. Robinson is, by most accounts, a children's television host. He has, inside his own world, a long-running show, and he is, in his professional life, a beloved entertainer of children. That is the public face. The private face is something else entirely. His marriage is loveless. His wife Margaret is one of the most exhausted-looking adult characters this cartoon ever drew, and she is shown, again and again, sitting in a chair with the lights low, doing essentially nothing, in a house in which nothing is happening, with a husband who is professionally beloved and personally insufferable. They do not talk. They do not touch. They do not seem to enjoy each other. They have been married for an unspecified but clearly long period of time, and they are both, very visibly, waiting for it to be over. The show keeps coming back to this. There is an episode in which Gumball discovers, with all the enthusiasm of a child meeting his hero, that Mr. Robinson is the man behind the show he loves. Gumball is delighted. He wants to be Mr. Robinson's biggest fan. He wants to befriend him. He wants to spend time with him. He believes, the way a child believes, that the warm face on the television is the actual face of the man behind it. Mr. Robinson does not want any of this. He is, in private, tired, bitter, and openly contemptuous of his own audience. He does not like children. He does not like his job. He does the show because he has to, and the warmth he projects on screen is, he tells Gumball more or less directly, a costume he puts on for money. The episode is funny. The episode is also one of the most cynical things this show ever produced, because it is, very plainly, a portrait of a man who has spent his career performing affection he does not feel for an audience of children he resents, and who has come home, every evening for years, to a marriage in which he has run out of even the energy to perform. The reason this is worth slowing down for is that Mr. Robinson is not, in the world of the show, a villain. He is not a bad man. He is not a danger to anyone. He is just an unhappy adult, in an unhappy marriage, in an unhappy career, who has reached the point in his life at which the only thing he can muster real energy for is being annoyed by the family next door. The Wattersons, in his eyes, are everything he is not. They are loud where he is quiet. They are warm where he is cold. They are messy where he is tidy. They have love in their house where he has nothing in his, and the proximity of their love to his nothing is unbearable to him, and so he yells at them from his lawn. The show plays this for laughs. The show is also showing you, in plain text, a man who is using anger at his neighbors as a way to avoid acknowledging the shape of his own life. His wife, Margaret, is one of the saddest figures in the entire show, and she is sad almost entirely without dialogue. She sits, she watches the television, she watches her husband, she watches the world go on outside her window. She is, on the rare occasions she does speak, kind to the Wattersons in ways her husband never is. She has, in one episode, a sequence of memories of when she was younger, and her life was different, and her marriage was different, and the sequence is presented with a real tenderness that the rest of the show is not always willing to give to background characters. She loved her husband once. She is still living with him out of something that is part habit and part dignity and part exhaustion. The show does not let her leave. The show does not give her a happy ending. The show just lets you see her, briefly, the way she sees herself. And then the camera moves on, and Mr. Robinson yells at Gumball again. There is a couple in Elmore, in one short subplot in a later season, who get divorced. They are minor characters and the show does not dwell on them, but the show notes them. It notes them in passing in a way that, when you watch it next to the Robinsons, takes on a particular weight. The Robinsons are not the only unhappy marriage in this town. They are just the unhappy marriage the show has decided to spend the most time with. And once you have watched their scenes, you start to see the same kind of unhappiness, in smaller doses, in the marriages of the other adult side characters. The mother and father of Banana Joe, the parents of Tobias, the various adult couples shown briefly in background scenes. Most of the marriages in Elmore look tired. Most of the marriages in Elmore look like people who have stopped trying. And the show does not make a big deal of it, because it does not have to. It just lets it be there in the background, the ambient hum of an adult world that is, in most of its rooms, not really working out for anyone in it. This is part of why the show's portrait of the Watterson marriage, with all of its dysfunction, lands as warm rather than bleak. The Wattersons are visibly tired. The Wattersons are visibly poor. The Wattersons are visibly held together by Nicole's increasingly thin grip on her own patience. But they do in fact still love each other. The show makes the choice, again and again, to show you Nicole and Richard, at the end of a disastrous episode, finding their way back to each other on the couch. They kiss, they hold hands, they laugh at something, and that warmth lands, because the show has been so careful to show you what the alternative looks like next door. The Wattersons are the warm marriage in a street of cold ones. The Wattersons are the warm family on a street of quiet ones. And the show is honest, in its quieter moments, that this is precarious. That the Wattersons could, very easily, with a few wrong turns, end up like the Robinsons. That the only thing keeping the family from being one of the unhappy ones is a small and ongoing choice that Nicole and Richard, every day, keep making. The point of bringing the Robinsons up is to set a frame for the rest of what we are about to talk about. The town of Elmore is full of these small, unhappy adult households, in which 2 or 3 people are slowly living out lives that are not what they had hoped for, in which the warmth has gone out of the rooms, in which the work has stopped feeling like work and started feeling like a sentence. The show keeps showing you these households. The show keeps trusting you to recognize them. The children of the show are all going to grow up into them, in one form or another, unless something interrupts the pattern. And the show does, sometimes, hint at characters interrupting the pattern. Penny is one of them. Anais might be one of them. But the show is honest that for most of the children in Elmore, the pattern is the pattern, and the most likely future for most of them is some version of what is happening in the houses next door right now. The most ambitious children in the show are going to end up, eventually, on the couch with the lights low, the way their parents do, the way the Robinsons do, the way most of the adult world of Elmore does. That is the quiet promise of the show's setting. It is a town that swallows you slowly. There is, however, in the world of Elmore, a class of characters for whom the future is even more directly visible, because they are already dead. The ghosts, the undead, the various small spirits and revenants who populate the school and the town, and the show's handling of them, which on the surface is a cute series of running gags, is on a closer look one of the most matter-of-fact treatments of death and the afterlife any children's cartoon has ever attempted. Carrie is a ghost. She has been a ghost for, as best the show ever clarifies, a very long time. She attends Elmore Junior High, she has friends among the living, she has a recurring romantic relationship with Darwin, and she is treated by the show, with admirable evenness, as a normal teenage girl who happens to have died. The show does not pretend her death is a small thing. The show does not pretend her undeath is a small thing either. There is an entire episode in which Carrie, exhausted by her own incorporeal state, possesses Gumball's body in order to experience physical sensation again, and the things she does once she has a body to use are funny and a little disturbing and a little heartbreaking. She wants to eat, she wants to feel, she wants to taste food, she wants to touch things. She has been without these for so long that the moment she gets them back she becomes, briefly, almost gluttonously alive, and the show, with real sympathy, lets her have that, before quietly returning her to the state she is going to have to live in forever. Her father, in the episode that introduces him, is a much older ghost than she is. He is also, openly, a profoundly unhappy figure. He has been a ghost for, again, a very long time. He has lived in the same house for the entirety of his afterlife. He has watched the people he loved when he was alive grow old and die and pass on, and he has remained, as ghosts in the world of this show seem to remain, stuck in the place where his life ended. Carrie's relationship with him is complicated and warm and sad. He is her father. He is also a figure of her past in a way few fathers in a show like this can be. He has known her for longer, in a sense, than her mother knew her, because her mother is not a ghost, and her mother could not follow her into this. There are family dynamics there that the show only ever sketches lightly, but the sketches are honest. The point that keeps emerging from Carrie's episodes is that the dead, in Elmore, are not actually elsewhere. They are right here. They are walking around. They are going to school. They are sitting in the rooms next door to the living. They are, in their way, also residents of the town, and the town has, at some point in its history, decided that this is how things work. There is no veil between the dead and the living in Elmore. The dead are here. The dead are aware. The dead have things they want and things they regret, and things they would like to do if they only still had a body. The show keeps treating this matter-of-factly, the way it treats everything else, but the implications stack up over time. The town the Wattersons live in has been settled, the show implies, for a long time, and the people who have died in it are mostly still in it. The buildings are full of them. The rooms are full of them. The space between one house and another is full of them. You just cannot always see them. There is a small recurring joke in the show in which various rooms turn out, on closer inspection, to be inhabited by ghosts the characters have not noticed. The bathroom, the basement, the corner of a closet, the space underneath a bed. There is, in one episode, a sequence in which the camera lingers on a wall in an ordinary location, and a face becomes briefly visible inside the wall. The face does not speak. The face is not commented on. The face is just there, and then the camera moves on. The show is, very quietly, telling you that the world is full, that the population of any given room is much larger than the people present, that the living characters are, in some ways, a thin layer on top of a much deeper and much older population that they cannot perceive most of the time. This is presented as background color. This is, on closer reading, one of the show's most genuinely eerie ideas, and once you have noticed it, you cannot stop noticing it. The school in particular is implied to be full of the dead. Carrie is not the only ghost student. There are several others, in the crowd shots, scattered through every season. Some of them have names, some of them do not. Some of them are clearly older than the school, in the sense that they predate the building. The show, in a couple of episodes, lets you see brief glimpses of what the school grounds were before the school was there, and the answer is, in classic Elmore fashion, a series of small, sad, slightly funny indications that this land has been used for a long time, and that the people who used it before are still around. Nobody on the staff seems particularly concerned about this. Miss Simeon, in particular, does not seem to register the dead students as anything different from the living students. She is, in fairness, a baboon teacher who is, as far as fans have pieced together, herself thousands of years old, so her own relationship with mortality is its own joke. But the point stands. The dead and the living coexist in this town with very little fuss, and the living mostly do not look up and notice. The show extends this matter-of-fact treatment of death to its handling of the body itself. There is, in a small handful of episodes, a startlingly casual approach to the idea that characters can be hurt, dismembered, dissolved, and otherwise damaged, and the show treats this with the cartoon logic that says nothing permanent has happened. And yet, when you look closely, the show keeps slipping in moments that suggest something more uncomfortable. There is an episode involving the trash, in which the boys come to understand that everything they have discarded over the course of their lives is sentient and is, in fact, a kind of community, living in a kind of underworld of refuse. There is an episode involving the appliances, in which the boys come to understand that the household appliances they have used carelessly have memories and feelings and a small society. There is an episode involving food, in which the boys come to understand that the food they eat is, also, sentient. The cumulative effect of these episodes is the strong implication that almost everything in this world is, in some way, alive, and that almost everything in this world is, also, subject to use and destruction and forgetting. There is, somewhere underneath all of this, a kind of cosmic moral question the show keeps poking at and then walking away from. If everything is alive, what is allowed to be eaten? If everything is sentient, what is allowed to be thrown away? If the dead are right next to us, what is allowed to be forgotten? The show does not answer any of these questions. The show is not going to. The show is a comedy, but the questions are present in episode after episode, and the show keeps showing you that the characters in Elmore are not really thinking about them. They are doing what people do. They are eating breakfast. They are throwing out the trash. They are walking past their dead grandparents in the hallway without noticing. And the show is quietly noting that this is also how it works for the audience watching the show. We also do not, in our own lives, think very hard about who and what we are stepping over. It is worth saying that the show does not handle death sentimentally. The show does not weep over death. It treats death as a fact of life, the way the characters in Elmore treat it, which is to say with a kind of practical, slightly amused acceptance. Carrie is not in distress about being dead. Her father is not in distress about being dead. The ghost students at the school are not in distress about being dead. Death, in Elmore, is one more state of being, and the people in that state are still, in some recognizable way, themselves. They still have crushes. They still have hobbies. They still have things they would like to do. They just have, by virtue of having died, a slightly different relationship with time and space, and the show takes that relationship seriously enough to give them entire episodes about it. This is the gentlest version of the show's darkness. There is no cruelty in the way the show handles its dead. It is not trying to scare you. It is just letting you know that the dead are there, that the dead have lives of a kind, and that the living, mostly, are not paying attention. The horror, if there is horror in this, is in the not paying attention. The horror is in the small daily fact that we are surrounded by the people who came before us, and that we do not, most of the time, slow down enough to notice them. And the show, with the slow patience that it brings to almost all of its darker readings, just lets you sit with that, in episode after episode, and trusts you to come to your own conclusions about what to do with it. The most disturbing version of this idea, though, the version the show eventually brings into open daylight, is the one in which the show looks directly at the camera and tells you that not only the dead are aware, the characters themselves are aware, the town is aware. The format is aware, and the maker, in the bleakest of these episodes, is not a benevolent god. The maker is one of their own, and he is angry. The Disaster is the name of a late-season episode in which the show breaks itself open and lets you see what is underneath. The premise, on paper, is that strange occurrences begin to ripple through the lives of the Wattersons, small inconsistencies in the world around them, and the trail leads, in the end, back to Rob, the same Rob the show abandoned in the White. He has stumbled, by way of an ordinary errand to an ordinary shop, into a remote that, in the universe of Elmore, turns out to control reality itself, and he is, when the boys catch up to him, in the middle of using it. The device works the world. He rewinds, he fast-forwards, he mutes, he pauses, he cuts, and he uses it, very methodically, to ruin Gumball's life. This is the kind of premise that, written badly, would be a one-off gag. The show writes it well. It takes the premise seriously, the way it takes most of its premises seriously, and once the family becomes aware of what Rob has in his hands, the implications start to detonate slowly across the rest of the episode. They are not in charge of their lives. Nobody in Elmore is in charge of their lives. Every choice they have ever made has been the choice of whoever was holding the device. Every loss, every joy, every moment of love, every moment of pain. Rob has been doing it to them for revenge. Whoever held the remote before has been doing it to them for entertainment. They do not understand the people on the other side of the screen. They are not seen as people. They are characters in a thing that is being watched. They have always been characters in a thing that is being watched. The episode goes places with this. There is a sequence in which the family confronts the figure with the remote in his hands, in the room where the device sits, and the show stages the confrontation as comedy. The show is also doing something genuinely confrontational with its own audience. The hand on the remote, in any honest reading, is a stand-in for any of us, watching the show on our own televisions, on our own devices, in our own bedrooms. The hand on the remote is doing to the Wattersons what we are doing to the Wattersons. We are also the universe. We are also the people whose attention is the thing the Wattersons have to perform inside of. This is one of those moments in the show in which the implications are clearly understood by the writers, and are clearly not going to be resolved by the episode. The Wattersons cannot, in any meaningful way, free themselves from the audience. They cannot stop being a show. They cannot stop being watched. The episode lets them, briefly, push back, and then it returns them to their lives in Elmore, and the next episode begins as if nothing has happened. They are back in their house. The remote is, for the moment, out of the wrong hands. The cycle continues. The show is, in passing, telling you that this is how it works, that the people you have grown to care about are inside a small, ongoing performance, and that the performance does not end when you stop watching, it just freezes in place until you come back. There is, in this same conversation, a separate set of episodes in which the show explicitly looks at its own animation style. Across the run of the show, the Wattersons live in a town where almost every other resident is drawn or rendered in a different artistic style. There are characters who are computer animated. There are characters who are claymation. There are characters who are puppets. There are characters who are stop-motion paper cutouts. There are characters who are pixel art, made of large colored blocks. There are characters who are live-action, photographs of real objects, real people, real food, real anatomical parts, dropped into the cartoon world as if they were just another neighbor. The show keeps doing this for years, and most viewers do not really question it. It is part of the visual texture of Elmore. The town is a town in which everything is rendered differently because everything is from a different artistic tradition. But the show does, in a small handful of episodes, raise the question of what that means. There is an episode in which the family discusses the visual inconsistency of their town openly, and the discussion is, on its face, a joke about the show's own production process. The Wattersons are aware that the people around them are made of different materials. They are aware that some of their classmates are made of clay, and some are made of pixels, and some are made of paper, and some are made of fur, and some are made of photographs of real teeth. They have stopped finding it strange. They have stopped finding it remarkable. They live in a world that is, on any honest reading, a kind of patchwork of every different tradition of moving image that has ever existed, and they accept this as the texture of their daily lives. What this leaves the audience with, by the end of the series, is the strong implication that Elmore is not a town in any normal sense. Elmore is a kind of holding space, a kind of last stop, a kind of waiting room, where the leftovers of every form of animation have been gathered together to live alongside each other. The town is a graveyard of formats. The town is a place where the techniques that did not make it into the modern era still live, and where the children of those techniques still go to school together, and where they still chase each other in the playground, and where they still fall in love. The Wattersons in this reading are the central family of a kind of small mortuary of the moving image, and the show is, in its quieter moments, fully aware of that, and is treating the show itself as a kind of preservation effort. We are watching, in the amazing world of Gumball, a deliberate gathering of forms that the industry would otherwise have allowed to die, and the show is letting them live one more time, in a small, soft pink house on a quiet street, before they go. That is a heavier reading than the show usually asks of you. The show does not require you to think about it that way, but the show, when you do think about it that way, holds up beautifully. The mixed media is not a stunt. The mixed media is a thesis. The town is not random. The town is a graveyard. The way the void is a graveyard. The way the trash episode is a graveyard. The way the appliance episode is a graveyard. The way Carrie's house is a graveyard. The Amazing World of Gumball is a show about who gets thrown away, and about what those discarded things look like when you finally do go look at them. And the show is, on a meta level, also a kind of refuge for forms of animation that nobody else would have made room for. This is the moment in the show's run at which the question of who is making it starts to become as interesting as the question of what is being made. Rob and his remote are one stand-in for the writer. The animator behind the show is another. The producers, who let the show run as long as it did, are another. And the network, which eventually stopped letting the show run, is another. The show is, in its final stretch, increasingly preoccupied with the question of whether anyone in the universe of Elmore has any power over their own story. And the answer it keeps quietly arriving at is no, they do not. They are made and watched and unmade by forces outside their universe, and the forces outside their universe are not particularly invested in their well-being. The forces outside their universe are watching them for entertainment, and when the entertainment is over, the forces will leave. The most painful version of this idea is the way the show actually ends. The show, after 6 seasons, runs out of time. It does not get a proper finale in the way most shows of its scale do. It gets, instead, a small, deliberately strange episode called The Inquisition, in which the universe of Elmore comes very close to being unmade entirely, and in which the family has to fight, with the limited tools they have, to keep themselves and their friends from being erased. The episode ends without resolution. The episode ends with the family suspended in mid-action, frozen on the edge of a cliff, and a promise from the show that the next chapter will eventually come. The show, in the world outside the show, has been waiting to be picked back up so that it can finish what it started. And until that happens, the people of Elmore are, in a very literal sense, stuck in the void themselves. They are unfinished. They are waiting. The universe that watched them stopped watching, and they have not yet been allowed to know what happens next. It is worth slowing down here for the side characters, because the show treats them with a level of attention that, in a lesser cartoon, would be reserved for the leads. The amazing world of Gumball is famously dense with named, designed, voiced background characters, and a surprising number of those characters get full episodes, full arcs, full small interior lives sketched in over the course of the run. Banana Joe is a banana. The show makes that joke many times. The show also, over the course of multiple episodes, lets you see the inside of Banana Joe's life. And what is inside is not particularly funny. Joe lives in the shadow of his father, who is also a banana, and who is, more importantly, also a banana with a sense of humor. And Joe has been raised inside the family rule that the only acceptable way to be a banana is to be funny. Joe is, in private, anxious about whether he is funny enough. Joe is, in private, exhausted by the performance of being the family joke. The show has an episode in which Joe tries, very seriously, to be taken seriously by someone, anyone, even his own family, and the episode ends without him quite getting there. The show is dense with versions of this. Anton is a slice of toast, and there are several episodes built around the small fact that Anton is, by virtue of being toast, fragile in a way the other students are not. He has died, on screen, multiple times, by being torn, eaten, dropped. He has come back, each time, with a new piece of toast taking his place. The other children in the school have accepted this as the normal state of Anton's life. The show, when it lingers on it, lets you see how strange and slightly sad this is. Anton is, in some real sense, a different person each time he comes back. The Anton who was eaten last week is not, in any meaningful sense, the same Anton who is sitting in class this week. The school has decided to treat them as the same person. Anton has decided to treat them as the same person. The show is happy to leave the implications hanging. Alan is a balloon. The show has multiple episodes about him, and the longest of them are about how impossibly, exhaustingly nice Alan is. He is kind. He is patient. He is generous. He is forgiving. He is the model student. He is the model boyfriend. He is the model friend. He is, when the show finally lets you see the inside of him, also a person who has worked very hard to be this nice, and who is not sure what is left of him if he is not. There is an episode in which Gumball, convinced that nobody could really be that nice without something dark underneath, sets out to find Alan's dark side. He cannot find one. He pushes Alan past every limit a person could plausibly have. Alan keeps being kind. The episode is, on the surface, a comedy about a balloon refusing to break. The episode is, on a longer look, a portrait of a person whose entire identity is performance, and whose performance is so total that there is no longer any way to see what is underneath, even for him. The show, with real tenderness, lets Alan stay sweet, but it does not tell you that the sweetness is the whole story. The sweetness is what Alan has built. The dark side is the wall he built it against. Bobert is a robot, and Bobert's story is the version of all of these that most directly looks like science fiction. He is a robot child built by parents who, depending on the episode, do or do not understand what they have made. He is, in his calmest moments, a friendly classmate who participates in the same daily routines as everyone else. He is, in his more uncomfortable moments, a small machine who is occasionally taken over by his own programming and turned into something the other children have to talk down. There is an episode in which Bobert decides to be Gumball, and the way he goes about being Gumball is to scan and copy and replicate every detail of Gumball's life and to start living it for him. And the episode ends with Bobert being talked back into being Bobert by a combination of force and persuasion. The episode is funny. The episode also raises, very directly, the question of what is keeping any of the children of Elmore from simply being replaced. Boebert is, on this show, the literal version of an idea that haunts the rest of the show. Most of the children of Elmore are, in one way or another, performing identities they did not choose, and the show is honest that the line between the performance and the person is not always as clear as it ought to be. Terry is a paper character, made of paper, and Terry is one of the show's clearest portraits of anxiety. She is afraid of germs, she is afraid of injuries, she is afraid of damage, she is afraid, more fundamentally, of being made of paper, which is to say of being constitutionally fragile. She washes her hands constantly, she avoids physical contact. She lives, on screen, the way an anxious child lives, and the show is sympathetic to her in a way that other shows of its scale would not be. There is no episode in which Terry is cured of her anxiety. There is no episode in which Terry suddenly learns to be brave. Terry remains, throughout the run, an anxious child made of paper, and the other children in her life remain, with varying degrees of patience, the friends of an anxious child made of paper. That is, in its way, one of the kindest things the show ever does. It does not require its anxious character to stop being anxious to remain part of the group. Hector is a giant. He is, in the literal sense, enormous, large enough to step on the rest of the cast if he wanted to. He is also, in his own life, a very small boy in a very large body. His mother is, by most accounts, a small witch, fiercely protective of him, who works very hard to keep him calm, because the emotions of giants run on a scale the world cannot really accommodate. His own physical strength is a danger to everyone around him, and he knows it, and he lives in fear of his own size. There is an episode in which Hector loses control of himself, and the loss of control becomes a citywide catastrophe, and the show does not let him off for the damage he does, even as it is careful to remind you that the damage was not his fault. Hector is a child who has been made dangerous by being too big for the world he was born into, and the show is honest about how lonely that is, and about how few people in his life can really meet him where he is. Idaho is a small potato. The show has done multiple episodes about Idaho, and the through line of all of them is that Idaho is poor, that Idaho lives a life of much less material comfort than even the Wattersons, that Idaho's family eats what they can grow, that Idaho's home is rural and small and weathered, and that Idaho, despite all of this, is one of the cheerier children in the show. The show treats his poverty without contempt and without sentimentality. Idaho's family loves him. Idaho's life has a kind of dignity. He is, when he comes to the school, slightly bewildered by the abundance of the other children's lives. He is, when he goes home, perfectly comfortable in the smaller frame of his own. The show is making, very quietly, a point about how poverty looks in different shapes in different families, and about how the children of those families learn to carry their own circumstances. There is also Sarah, who is, in the show's own joking telling, a kind of self-insert fan character, a girl with bright pink hair who is obsessed with Gumball and Darwin, and who follows them around imagining their lives as a kind of romantic fiction. The show treats her with real affection. The show also, in her quieter episodes, lets you see that the reason Sarah lives so much inside the fiction is that the fiction is more vivid than her own life, and that the children whose lives she idealizes do not actually know her very well, and that her devotion to them is, on her side, much larger than their interest in her. She is a fan. She has the loneliness that a fan has. The show is honest about it. It does not let her be a joke about fandom and nothing else. It lets her have her own face, in her own moments, looking out a window, hoping that today might be the day she is invited in. This is the texture of the school. This is the texture of the town. Every one of these characters has the same property, which is that they look, at first, like a single joke, and that they reward attention with depth the joke did not promise. The show is full of these. The show could have 100 episodes that are just one of these portraits. The show, in some real sense, does. And the cumulative effect of all of these small portraits, over the run of the series, is an Elmore that does not feel like a cartoon town. It feels like a real place full of people who are, in their various ways, doing their best with what they were given, and whose various best is not, in most cases, going to be enough to give them lives much larger than the ones they have. The show loves them anyway. The show treats their smallness as worth animating. That is, more than anything, what makes the darkness of the show bearable. Even the smallest characters are taken seriously. Even the ones who only have one face. Even the ones who only have one joke. There is one more axis worth tracing, though, before we keep moving, and that is class. Because if you start sorting the children of Elmore by who has money and who does not, the picture that emerges is sharper than most cartoons would dare to draw. Tobias's family is the wealthy family of the show. The Wilsons live in a large house on the same street as the Wattersons, and their house is, in every shot, designed to draw the eye. It is bigger, it is brighter. It is full of objects that are clearly more expensive than the objects in the Wattersons' house. The family inside that house is, the show keeps showing you, also brighter and louder and more theatrical than the Wattersons, but the brightness is, on inspection, a kind of permanent advertisement. Tobias's father is a small, tightly muscled, vain creature whose entire life appears to be dedicated to the project of being attractive. Tobias's mother is similarly invested in her own appearance. The two of them, in scene after scene, are performing wealth and beauty for an audience that mostly includes only each other and the neighbors, and, occasionally, their children. They do not seem, in any of these scenes, to particularly enjoy their lives. They seem to be holding a pose. Tobias is the child of that household, and he is, on his own, one of the show's most precisely observed portraits of what it does to a child to grow up inside a family whose primary value is appearance. He is loud, he is theatrical, he is needy. He acts out, constantly, for attention. He competes for praise. He sulks when he does not get it. He is, in his quieter moments, visibly aware that his parents are more interested in being looked at than in looking at him, and his way of dealing with that is to be as loud as he can possibly be at all times. His sister is older, and she is, by the show's account, the favored child, and the dynamic between them is the dynamic of a slightly neglected younger brother trying very hard to keep up with a slightly preferred older sister, and the parents floating somewhere above both of them, neither quite engaged with the children's actual lives. The show keeps showing you the inside of the Wilson house. The inside of the Wilson house is, almost always, cold. The lights are warm, the furniture is plush, the colors are saturated, but the warmth of the house never quite translates into warmth between the people in it. The Wattersons fight constantly, and forgive constantly, and stick together. The Wilsons mostly perform. They have small spats. They have small reconciliations. They do not, in any episode the show gives them, seem to be doing the same daily work of actually loving each other that the Wattersons are doing. They are a family in name. They are a brand in practice, and Tobias is the small child trying to figure out, in real time, whether he is a person inside this household or a small additional feature of the brand. You can read the Wilsons next to the Robinsons and get a kind of sketch of the upper end of Elmore's adult world. The Robinsons have run out of energy to perform. The Wilsons still have the energy and are using it on the wrong thing. The Wattersons are, in this triangulation, the messy and warm middle. Below them, in the show's economic ladder, sit families like Idaho's, and like a handful of other small characters whose homes the show visits briefly. There is, in the show, an unspoken but very clear class structure, and the show keeps showing you that the position you occupy in that structure shapes the kind of childhood you get to have. The Wilson kids get attention they did not want, and praise they cannot trust. The Watterson kids get love they can trust, but resources they cannot. The Idaho family child gets neither resources nor abundance, but does get a kind of quiet stability. The show is not really judging any of these, and the show is not really proposing solutions. The show is simply being honest that, in Elmore, the shape of your house and the color of your kitchen and the size of your fridge are doing some real work in shaping the shape of you. Penny's father, beyond being the loud, frightened patriarch we have already talked about, is also a successful businessman. The Fitzgerald family appears, in their material life, to be doing comfortably well. Penny is not poor. She is not even close to poor. She lives in a different relationship to money than Gumball does, and the show is careful to register this in small ways without making it the dramatic center of any episode. She has things he does not. Her clothes are nicer, her family takes trips his family cannot. The show does not turn this into a romantic obstacle in any sustained way, but it is there, in the texture of every scene where the two of them are in each other's houses. You can extend the same logic across the school. Some of the children are clearly the children of money. Some of the children are clearly not. The school does not differentiate between them in any official way, but the small daily details of who has what equipment, who eats what food, who wears what clothes, are all there in the background, and the show is honest about them when it has reason to be. There is an episode in which the school holds a fundraising event, and the fundraising event reveals, in passing, who has what to give. There is an episode in which the children compare their summer plans, and the summer plans reveal, in passing, who can afford to go where. There is no big speech in any of these episodes. There is no moral about wealth and poverty. There is just the steady, slightly weary observation that the children of Elmore are growing up inside an economy, and that the economy is shaping them whether they understand that or not. The town itself, beyond the families inside it, is also doing work. Elmore is, the show keeps showing you, the kind of town that has seen better days. The shops in the downtown area are weathered, the streets are not new. The mall, where the Wattersons sometimes go, is the kind of mid-sized regional mall that looks like it has been losing tenants slowly for years. The supermarket where Gumball gets a part-time job at one point in the run is a small, slightly worn store run by an exhausted manager. The pizza place, the gym, the hospital, the various municipal buildings, all of them are designed, with real care, to look like a place that has been there long enough to be tired. Elmore is not a glamorous town. Elmore is not a doomed town. Elmore is, the way many small American-style towns are, in a long, quiet, slow decline that nobody quite wants to name. The show keeps reinforcing this. There is an episode about the local hospital that turns out to be, on closer inspection, an indictment of the way the hospital is funded and staffed. There is an episode about the local police that turns out to be, on closer inspection, an indictment of the way the police are trained. There is an episode about the local government that turns out to be, on closer inspection, an indictment of the way the local government is run. In none of these episodes does the show pause to deliver a speech. The show is, throughout, a comedy. The show is, throughout, willing to play any of these institutional failings for big laughs. But the failings are real, in the world of the show, and the failings keep accumulating, and by the end of the run you have a portrait of a town in which essentially no public institution is actually functioning. The school does not teach, the hospital does not heal, the police do not police, the government does not govern. The mall is dying, the downtown is dying. The people are doing their best inside a structure that has, for a long time, stopped doing its part. This is a heavy reading. The show does not push it on you. The show is, throughout, a colorful, fast-moving comedy aimed at children. But the reading is there if you want it, and one of the reasons the show has aged so well, one of the reasons people keep coming back to it years after it stopped making new episodes, is that the reading turns out, when you do reach for it, to be one of the most honest portrayals of the actual texture of small-town life in late-period Western culture that any cartoon of its scale has ever attempted. The Wattersons are not a fantasy family. The Wattersons are a recognizable family, in a recognizable town, in a recognizable economy, navigating a recognizable set of pressures. The show dresses them in fur and feathers and pixels and clay. The show then quietly tells you the truth about them anyway. That is the trick the show is doing on a structural level. It uses the color, the noise, the speed, the visual invention to give you cover. You can watch the show as a cheerful blast of color, and the show will allow that. You can also, if you want, watch the show as a small ongoing documentary of what it feels like to be a child in a town that does not really have a future, and the show will allow that too. The remarkable thing is that both readings are present at once in essentially every episode. The remarkable thing is that you can rewatch a single episode twice in a single afternoon and get two completely different shows out of it. The remarkable thing is that neither of those shows is the wrong one. The show is, on purpose, both. Once you accept that the show is both, the next layer is to look at the way the show treats the inheritance of all of this from one generation to the next. Because the show, beyond being a comedy about the present moment of the Watterson family, is also, increasingly across its run, a show about the way the past has set up the present, and about how difficult it is to break out of the patterns that the previous generation set running. Nicole's parents, the Senecourts, are introduced relatively late in the show's run, and the introduction is its own small piece of horror. They live somewhere far from Elmore. They are martial arts experts. They are old, dignified, immaculately controlled, and almost entirely unable to express affection. They look at their daughter with the steady, weighing expression of people who have already, decades ago, decided that she was a disappointment. They look at their grandchildren with the same expression. They have come to visit because something in the social rules of the family has obliged them to come to visit, and they perform the visit with the precision of people fulfilling a contract. Nicole, around them, is not Nicole. She is smaller. She is more cautious. She is more apologetic. She speaks more quietly. She does not around them snap. She does not around them lose her temper. She is, in their presence, the version of herself they have always wanted her to be, which is to say a quieter, sadder, more obedient version. And the children of the Watterson family watch this with what is clearly a mixture of confusion and concern. They have never, before this episode, seen their mother shrink. They have never, before this episode, understood that their mother is the person she is at home, because she is fighting, every day, against being the person her parents made her into. The show lets them watch. The show lets you watch. The show does not, in the episode, deliver a speech about generational trauma. The show just shows you Nicole, smaller in her parents' presence, and trusts you to register what that means. Richard's mother, Granny Jojo, is also introduced over the course of the show, and she is also a study in what the previous generation has done to the current one. She is loud, she is overbearing, she is dramatic, she is, by the show's own framing, a kind of large pink whirlwind of unwanted opinion. She and Nicole have a strained relationship that the show does not try to soften. She and Richard have a relationship that is, very obviously, the relationship of a smothering mother and a son who has never quite been allowed to become an adult. The show is careful to show you, in flashbacks and in passing comments, the kind of childhood Richard had, and the picture is, in its own small way, dark. He was not abused. He was not neglected. He was simply never required to grow. His mother did everything for him. His mother made every decision for him. His mother is, in some real sense, the reason Richard cannot hold a job today, and the show is honest about that. Richard's father, Frankie, is another piece of this. He appears in a small handful of episodes, and the picture the show gives you of him is of an absent, unreliable man who left the family when Richard was young, who came back briefly, who left again, who keeps reappearing and disappearing on the family's schedule rather than his own. He is charming, he is shallow, he is a small ongoing wound in Richard's life that Richard has chosen, more or less, to not look at. The show lets him into the story when it wants to, and lets him out of the story when it wants to, the way Frankie himself comes and goes. And the show is honest about what it means that Richard's father was the kind of father he was. Richard has not, as an adult, been able to be a particularly active father himself, because nobody ever modeled it for him. He is doing the best he can with what he was given. What he was given was not very much. This is the texture of the family the show is depicting. Two adults, each carrying the unhealed pattern of their own parents, raising three children, doing their best to not pass on what was done to them, and not always succeeding. Nicole's rage is, in this reading, the rage of a person trying very hard not to be cold like her parents, and finding that the alternative the world has handed her is to hold so much in that she occasionally explodes. Richard's permanent childhood is, in this reading, the result of being a child whose parents did not want him to grow up, and a child whose father was not around to show him how. Gumball, Darwin, and Anais are the next iteration. They are, in their own ways, already carrying the family's particular shape. The show is, in its quieter moments, very interested in this. It has multiple episodes about the children noticing themselves becoming their parents. Gumball, in his cruelest moments, sounds like his mother in her most stressed moments. Anais, in her loneliest moments, looks like her grandparents in their most withholding moments. Darwin, in his most overwhelmed moments, looks like his father in his most overwhelmed moments. The patterns are passing through. The show is not optimistic that the patterns can be broken. The show is also not despairing that the patterns cannot be broken. The show is just observing that the patterns are there, that they have always been there, and that the work of any given family is the work of trying to interrupt them where you can, and trying to live with them where you cannot. This is one of the deepest layers of the show's darkness, because it is the layer most likely to be familiar to you. The void is a metaphor. The disaster is a metaphor. Carrie is a metaphor. The Robinsons are a metaphor. The generational pattern is not a metaphor. It is the actual mechanism of how families work, and the show is, in its own small, soft way, telling the truth about it. Children become the parents they were given. Sometimes a child gets out. Most of the time, a child does not. The best most children can hope for is to be a slightly less wounded version of their parents, who in turn raise slightly less wounded children, who in turn raise slightly less wounded children, until, generations later, the original wound is something nobody quite remembers, but that everyone in the family still carries a softened version of. The show, in its handling of this, lands on a kind of bruised hope. The Wattersons are not going to escape the patterns. Nicole is not going to magically become a person who never snaps. Richard is not going to magically become an employed and present partner. The children are not going to magically grow up untouched by their parents. But the Wattersons are, the show keeps insisting, slightly better at this than the parents they came from. Nicole is warmer to her children than her parents were to her. Richard is more present, in his way, than his father was. Gumball, Darwin, and Anais will, in turn, in the futures the show occasionally glimpses, be slightly warmer and slightly more present than their own parents are. The hope is small. The hope is not transformational. The hope is just that each generation in this family has been moving in a slightly better direction than the previous one, and that if they keep moving for long enough, somewhere down the line, somebody in this family might actually get to be okay. The show, in its final stretch, has been less and less able to deliver that hope cleanly, because the show, in its final stretch, has had to confront the fact that it is also a piece of media, and that pieces of media do not always get to finish the patterns they start. The Inquisition, the final episode of the original run, is the show looking at itself and admitting that the universe of Elmore is also subject to the patterns of the universe outside it, and that the universe outside it has decided, for the moment, that the show is going to be paused. The pause is, in its own way, the most painful piece of darkness the show has ever produced, because the pause is real, and it has lasted for years, and the family in the small pink house is, in a meaningful sense, frozen inside it. The Inquisition is the last new episode the show produced in its original run, and it is worth talking about with some care, because the way the show chose to go off the air is itself one of the bleakest pieces of authorship this kind of cartoon has ever attempted. The premise of the episode is simple. A force has arrived at Elmore Junior High whose purpose, as far as the show is willing to say, is to remove the unusual characters from the world, the various students whose existence is, in one way or another, strange. The students with the wrong number of legs. The students who are made of materials they should not be made of. The students who are too different to fit. The force is presented as official, bureaucratic, and quiet. It arrives in suits. It carries clipboards. It interviews the children. It writes things down. It begins, very methodically, to disappear them. This is, in the world of the show, the long-threatened consequence of all of the show's previous quiet themes. The void was the first hint that Elmore had a graveyard. The disaster was the second. The various small disappearances over the run of the series, the friends who only appeared once, the characters who were never seen again, were all small previews of what the Inquisition is finally doing in the open. The unusual are being filed away. The strange are being removed. The town is being, very gently and very politely, made smaller and cleaner and more standard. And the children, in this episode, finally see what is happening, and they realize that they are, every one of them, candidates to be filed away. Gumball and Darwin and Anais understand, very quickly, that they themselves are exactly the kind of children the Inquisition has come for. They are the wrong kind of family. They are the wrong kind of bodies. They are the wrong kind of design. The Wattersons, taken together, are essentially a one-family argument for the legitimacy of difference, and the Inquisition is, structurally, the force that has come to argue against them. The episode does not soften this. The episode lets the threat be the threat. The family runs. The friends run. The town fragments. People disappear in front of each other, and the disappearances are not undone by the end of the episode. The episode also closes on a cliff. Literally. The family ends the episode in the middle of an unresolved chase, in the middle of an unresolved threat, in the middle of an unresolved fight to save the people they love from being filed out of existence. The screen freezes. The story stops. The show ends. It does not deliver a finale. It does not deliver a moral. It does not give the Wattersons their happy ending. It just stops. And what is on screen when it stops is a family in midair, suspended over a fall, with no resolution promised and no rescue in sight. The show, in choosing to end this way, is doing something genuinely brutal. The previous 6 seasons had earned, in any honest accounting, an ending of some kind. The audience had earned an ending of some kind. The characters had earned an ending of some kind. The show declined to provide it. The show, instead, chose to go off the air in mid-sentence, with the implication that the sentence might one day be finished, and the further implication that it might not. That choice was, in part, forced on the production by the realities of the network and the calendar, but the choice was also, in part, the show's own. The Inquisition is not a finale that got interrupted. The Inquisition is a finale that the show wrote, with intention, as an unfinished sentence, because the show, by the time of its last season, had become deeply preoccupied with the question of what happens to a story when the people in charge of telling it stop wanting to tell it. The Inquisition is the answer the show offered to that question. The story, when the people in charge stop telling it, freezes. The characters, when the story freezes, freeze. The void, in a very real sense, becomes everywhere, because the entire show becomes the void. For the audience, this has been, for a long stretch of years, the actual lived experience of being a fan of this show. The show stopped. There has been talk, on and off, of a feature-length continuation that would pick up where the Inquisition left off. The talk has been, by all accounts, real talk, with people attached, with development happening, with the original creator involved at various stages and in various capacities. The continuation has been promised, paused, repromised, repaused, and at the time of this script, the continuation has, by most accounts, returned in some form. The exact form it has taken and the exact arc it follows are the kind of details that change as new episodes air. The waiting was, in some sense, an extension of the Inquisition. The show was frozen on the cliff for years. The Wattersons were suspended in mid-air. The audience was standing in the White Room. This is the literal, real-world version of the show's own central darkness, which is the small, frightening fact that media can simply stop, that stories do not always get to finish, that characters do not always get to walk off the screen into the resolution they have been working toward, that sometimes the people who made the show go away, the network that aired it moves on, the cultural moment that supported it shifts, and the result is a series of people, frozen forever, in the last position they were drawn in. The Amazing World of Gumball is, in this sense, a show that has been forced, very publicly, to live out its own thesis. The Void was a hypothesis. The Inquisition was a prediction. The years that followed have been the proof. There is, on top of this, the additional layer of what the show was not allowed to do while it was on the air. There were, over the run of the show, a handful of episodes that were rewritten, re-edited, pulled, or otherwise altered between production and broadcast. This is not unusual for a long-running children's series. The reasons given, when reasons were given, were the standard reasons. A joke pushed too far, a reference that was misread, a real-world event that made a previously written sequence land differently than the writers had intended. The show, by all accounts, mostly accepted these alterations as part of the cost of doing the job. The show, at the level of its writers, did push back where it could. The result, over the run, is a show whose final shape is, in some small number of places, not quite the shape the writers had originally wanted. The differences are not, by any measure, devastating. The differences are, by any measure, present. The wiki and the longer-term fan community have, over the years, kept track of the small alterations and absences, and the picture that emerges is the picture you would expect. The network was, on balance, generous with the show. The network was not, on balance, infinitely generous. There were lines. The show knew where the lines were. The show, occasionally, walked them up to and over them and accepted the editing that resulted. The most charged version of this is the small handful of jokes the show clearly slipped past the standards of its own network. The show is, in its sense of humor, more adult than many cartoons aimed at the same audience. The show is, in its sense of humor, willing to land jokes about adult life, about adult relationships, about the inside of a marriage, that other children's cartoons would not attempt. Most of these jokes are subtle enough that the children watching the show would not register them, and most of these jokes are sharp enough that the adults watching the show with their children would. There are, in the show's run, a small handful of moments where the joke is, in retrospect, harder than the show was supposed to be able to land, a line that, on rewatch, has more weight than it had on first viewing, a visual gag that, on rewatch, is reading a clearly different room than the one the children watching it were seeing. The show was, in this sense, made by adults who were aware that adults were watching. The show was, in this sense, written, in part, for them. The longer the show ran, the more those moments accumulated. And by the time of the show's final season, those moments were as much a part of the texture of the show as the jokes the children were watching. This is part of why the show has aged the way it has. The audience that grew up watching the show as children have now, many of them, become adults, and the adults are rewatching the show with adult eyes, and the show is, on the rewatch, a different show. The jokes they did not understand at the time are landing now. The marriages that were background color are now the foreground. The institutions that were colorful sets are now recognizably hollow. The town that was a fun place to spend half an hour in is now a place that looks, embarrassingly, like a real town. And the show, in some quiet way, was always meant to do this. It was always meant to grow with the people who first watched it. The darkness was not buried. The darkness was just patient. There are, when you start looking, more of those quietly adult moments in the show than you remember. The episodes about Nicole's job at the Rainbow Factory, taken together, form an unusually detailed portrait of what it looks like to be an underpaid worker under an emotionally abusive employer. The factory is a closed environment in which the workers are kept in long shifts, in which the boss roams the floor, in which the work itself is hollow, in which the small daily indignities of being managed by someone who does not respect you accumulate over time. Nicole, in the episodes that take place at the factory, is not a comic figure. She is a person doing a job. The boss, in those same episodes, is genuinely awful in a way that is recognizable to anyone who has ever had a job. The other workers, when they appear, are uniformly tired in a way that is recognizable to anyone who has ever spent any time in a room full of people who are paid less than they ought to be. The show is, in these episodes, doing labor journalism in cat form. The children watching the show experience it as a fun episode about Nicole at work. The adults watching the show experience it as a small, recognizable portrait of the actual conditions of much of modern employment. There is, similarly, an extended set of episodes about Richard's relationship with food, with television, with his own body, that are, on closer reading, doing the work of portraying something close to depression. He spends his days on the couch. He spends his days eating things that do not nourish him. He spends his days watching shows that do not interest him. He has, very clearly, a depressive flatness in many of his scenes that is funny on first reading and somewhat heavier on second. The show is honest that this is what he is. The show is honest that this is, in some real way, a problem. The show is also honest that the problem is not going to be fixed in any single episode, and that the family around Richard has, more or less, accepted that this is who he is. The show treats his depression with great affection. The show does not, in any of these episodes, suggest that the affection is going to be enough to lift him out of it. That is also part of the show's honesty. Affection is not always enough. Sometimes the person you love is going to keep sitting on the couch. There is the entire ongoing observation, threaded through many of the show's adult moments, that Nicole and Richard are not, by any reasonable measure, sexually invisible to each other, and that the show is happy to acknowledge that they have a marriage in the full sense, and that the children in the house are, occasionally, made uncomfortable by it. The show plays these moments delicately, but it plays them. There is a recurring small joke about closed doors. There is a recurring small joke about parents disappearing for an evening. There is a recurring small joke about the children being told they will be sleeping at a relative's house for a night, and not really understanding why. These jokes are, in cartoon terms, gentle. These jokes are, in adult terms, the show acknowledging that the Wattersons are a couple, in the full sense, and that the children are growing up in a house where the parents have not forgotten that they were once two people in love before they were two parents. This is more than most cartoons of this scale do. Many children's cartoons treat the parents as functionally asexual figures, present primarily for plot and authority. The Amazing World of Gumball does not. The Wattersons, in their quieter scenes, are visibly affectionate with each other in the way an actual long-married couple is. Nicole kisses Richard. Richard holds Nicole. They share looks across rooms. They have, in a handful of episodes, full sequences that are about the two of them as people, not as parents, and the sequences are warm in a way that the show is careful about deploying because the warmth is most effective when it is rare. The marriage is part of the texture. The children of the audience do not necessarily clock it. The adults of the audience do. And the cumulative effect, over the run of the show, is a marriage that feels real, in a way that the marriages of most cartoon parents do not. There is also, scattered through the show, a small handful of jokes that are sharper than the show's general register, that land more like an adult cartoon than a children's one, and that the network presumably either did not catch or decided to let through. There is a brief sequence in which the show makes a joke about adult relationships that is, by any reading, just barely on the right side of the line. There is a brief sequence in which the show makes a joke about death that is, by any reading, just barely on the right side of the line. There is a brief sequence in which the show makes a joke about the medium itself, about the practice of making a cartoon, about the small daily indignities of being a piece of animation in the late period of the industry, that is, by any reading, deeply meta and deeply tired. The show was, in those moments, written by people who had been doing this for a long time, and the people who had been doing this for a long time had a lot to say, and the show allowed them to say a small amount of it in passing. None of these jokes break the show. None of them are anything a child would register as a problem. But they accumulate. They are the small adult heart of the show, beating quietly underneath everything else. The show is also, throughout, willing to talk about sex education, dating, and the inner life of children in ways that other children's cartoons are not. Gumball's pursuit of Penny is one of the longest and most carefully tracked romantic arcs in the medium. The arc treats Gumball and Penny as actual young people with actual feelings, who are figuring out, in real time, what it is to like someone and to be liked back. The show is patient with them. The show is honest about how clumsy they are. The show is willing to let them, in their late season episodes, kiss, hold each other, sit close on a couch in a way that is, very clearly, the way a young couple sits on a couch when they are still figuring out where their hands go. The show does not sexualize them. The show also does not infantilize them. The show is, instead, doing the more interesting and more honest work of treating young romance as actually romantic, with all of the joy and confusion that implies. Beyond Gumball and Penny, the show has a number of other young romances that it treats with the same care. Darwin and Carrie, the goldfish and the ghost. Tobias and Rachel, when she appears. Various small one-episode romances among the side characters. The show is, throughout, willing to take young feelings seriously. The show does not, in any episode, suggest that the love of an 11-year-old is somehow less real than the love of an adult. The show treats first crushes with the gravity that first crushes have when they are happening to you. The show is, in this respect, more emotionally honest than most cartoons about the inner life of its young characters. And that emotional honesty is, in its way, another small piece of the show's darker side. The children of Elmore are, very clearly, going to be hurt by the people they love, and the show is, very clearly, going to let them be hurt. Because the alternative is to pretend their feelings are not real. There is one more thread to pull here before we begin to land, and it is the question of what happens, in the show, to the children who do not survive the social structure of the school. The show is not as bleak as some cartoons about bullying. The show does not let its bullies win in any sustained way. Tina Rex, as we have said, is given a sympathetic episode that explains her aggression and makes her a more rounded character. But the show is honest that not every child in the school is going to be allowed the same rehabilitation. Some of the children in the school are simply hurt. Some of the children in the school are simply lonely. Some of the children in the school are simply not going to find their people. The show has multiple episodes about small unloved figures whose unloving is, by the end of the episode, not really resolved. They keep being unloved. They keep going to school. They keep eating alone. The show makes a kind of soft peace with the fact that some of its characters are going to be the children who eat alone, and the show does not, in most cases, pretend to fix them. That is, in some ways, the show at its most honest. Not every story has a turn. Not every lonely child finds a friend. Not every misunderstood child gets to be understood. Some of them just keep being lonely. Some of them just keep being misunderstood. And the show, with the same patience it brings to everything else, lets them be that, and trusts that the audience will recognize them, and trusts that the recognition is, itself, a kind of small comfort. The unloved children of Elmore are, in being shown, in being named, in being given small faces and small voices, slightly less unloved than they were before the camera looked at them. The show, in looking at them, is offering them what it can, which is not much, but it is something. It is worth zooming out at this point and looking briefly at the show as it actually exists as a piece of work in the real world. The Amazing World of Gumball was created by Ben Bocquelet, who came to the project after a background in advertising animation. The original premise of the show, as it has been described in interviews over the years, came in part from his attempt to use a set of mismatched character designs that had been rejected by other projects, and to put them all into a single world. That is, in a small way, the show's own origin story, and it is, in a smaller way, the show's own thesis statement. The Amazing World of Gumball is, from the very beginning, a home for characters who were not going to be put anywhere else. The Wattersons themselves, and the school they go to, and the town they live in, are populated by what the original creator has, in various interviews, been generous about calling the leftovers. The leftovers got their own show. The leftovers got 6 seasons. The show was produced in the United Kingdom for an American network, with animation work spread across studios in Europe, and the production reality of it was, by all accounts, a long, exhausting, ambitious effort. The mixed media style was not an easy choice. Every episode required the studio to coordinate live-action photography, 2-dimensional animation, 3-dimensional animation, puppetry, and a variety of other techniques, often in the same shot. The animators, the writers, the directors, and the actors involved in the show have all spoken, in various interviews over the years, about how hard the show was to make, and about how rewarding it was to make. The show was, by all accounts, a labor of love conducted under serious time and budget pressure, and the result, on screen, is a show that visibly cared about its own work. You can see it in the small details, the texture of a wall, the reflection in a window, the thoughtful framing of a small character. The show was made by people who were doing more than the job required them to do, and the doing of more is visible everywhere in the show's runtime. The voice cast changed several times over the run of the series, because the actors playing the young characters were themselves children when the show began, and their voices, like the voices of all children, did not stay where they had started. The actor who voices Gumball changed multiple times across the run, as did the actor who voices Darwin, and as did, in their own ways, several of the supporting children's voices. This is, in some sense, a small ongoing piece of the show's own theme. The voices of the children, like the children themselves, were growing up while the show was being made. The show was, in its real production, a small accidental document of the actual passage of time in the lives of the small actors who made it. By the end of the show's run, the boys voicing the boys sounded different than they had at the start, and the show absorbed those differences without ever pausing to explain them. The boys were aging inside their characters. The characters were absorbing the aging of their boys. It is a small thing. It is also a real thing. The show ended its original broadcast run, in the last episode of its final season, in June, in the year 2019. Since that ending, the show has been, in its own way, in a state of suspended animation for a long stretch. The creator, Ben Bocquelet, has spoken in interviews about the next chapter, about the planned feature-length continuation, about the slow process of getting that continuation through development. The continuation has been announced, paused, re-announced, and at the time of this script, the continuation has, by most accounts, arrived in some form, with new episodes finding their way to audiences through streaming services. The exact arc the new work will follow, and the question of how the original cliffhanger will be resolved across that arc, are details that, by their nature, keep shifting. The show has been waiting for the next thing to happen for years, and that waiting has now, by most accounts, begun to thaw. That waiting is, in a way, the most appropriate possible epilogue for a show that has spent 6 seasons quietly meditating on what it means to be forgotten and what it means to be remembered. The Wattersons are, the show implied throughout, characters whose lives only existed because someone was watching. The people watching, in the world outside the show, did not stop watching after the show ended. The show kept finding new audiences, on streaming services, on social media, on the various corners of the internet where people gather to celebrate things they loved. The show became, in the years after its end, more visible rather than less. A new generation of children discovered it. The original generation rewatched it as adults. The fan base, on the long quiet years between the ending and the announced continuation, kept the show alive in a way that the show itself, in its own thematic logic, would have recognized. The audience refused to let the characters be filed away. The audience kept looking. The audience kept remembering. And in the universe of the Amazing World of Gumball, refusing to forget is, very directly, the thing that brings the forgotten back into the room. That is, in the end, the answer the show gives to its own central question. The void is real. The Inquisition is real. The forces that would file the strange away are real. The institutional indifference is real. The small unhappiness in the houses next door is real. The patterns that pass from one generation to the next are real. The cost of being made cheaply, of being designed badly, of being treated carelessly, is real. The show is honest about all of this. The show does not pretend that the world it is depicting is anything other than what it is. But the show also keeps insisting, in episode after episode, that the response to all of this is to look, to pay attention, to remember, to refuse to let the people around you be filed away. The Wattersons survive their show because, in the show, they keep looking at each other. The audience survives the show because, in the years after the show ended, they kept looking at the show. The thesis is small. The thesis is durable. Look at things. Look at people. Look at the small lives that the world is trying to teach you not to look at. The looking is, in itself, the medicine. That is also, in the simplest possible terms, the work of a show like this. The Amazing World of Gumball spent 6 seasons looking, very carefully, at a small family in a small town, and at the small lives around that family, and at the small lives around those lives, and at the small lives around those, until the entire world of Elmore was made of small lives that the show had looked at carefully. By the end of the run, no character in the town was beneath the show's attention. No character in the town was too strange to be given an episode. No character in the town was too sad to be allowed a small moment of tenderness. That is, in a children's cartoon, an enormous moral achievement. It is the moral achievement underneath all the color and noise. It is what makes the darkness of the show bearable. The darkness is real. The looking is the response. The looking is what the show is. There are a handful of episodes near the end of the run that deserve their own slow look, because they are the episodes in which the show, having spent 6 seasons setting up the conditions for darkness, allows itself to actually sit in the darkness for a sustained period. The Inquisition is one of them. The Disaster, which we have already gone through, is another. There is, in addition, a small cluster of late-season episodes in which the show essentially abandons its standard plot rhythms and lets the characters drift through small, strange, atmospheric situations whose only real purpose is to make you feel how heavy the show has been all along. There is, for example, an episode in which Gumball and Darwin find themselves on a long walk home through Elmore at night, and the entire town becomes, in the course of that walk, a kind of waking dream. The streets they pass through are familiar and not. The people they meet are recognizable and not. The lighting, the music, the pacing, all of it slows down to a register that the show does not normally allow itself. The two of them just walk and talk and notice things, and the things they notice are the small, uncomfortable things that have been in the background of the show forever. The exhausted faces in lit windows, the empty parking lots of closed shops, the single car passing on a street at 3 in the morning. The show is, in episodes like this one, allowing itself to be the kind of show that, on a normal day, it would not have permission to be. It is allowing itself a stillness it does not usually allow itself, and the stillness is, in its quiet way, where the show is most honest. There are episodes in which the show, with great care, allows itself to depict loneliness as a felt thing, rather than as a setup for a joke. There is an episode in which Anais, by herself, in her room, plays a long, quiet game with her stuffed rabbit, and the camera holds on her for longer than the show normally holds on anything, and the silence of the room, and the color of the late afternoon light, and the small quiet sound of a 4-year-old talking to a toy combine, into something that is, in its own right, a small piece of cinema. The episode is not really about anything. The episode is just letting you sit with the fact of this small child being alone in her room. The show has not, in these moments, become a tragedy. The show is still a comedy, mostly. But it is honest enough to let the camera linger when it knows that lingering is the thing the moment requires. There is, similarly, a small handful of late-season episodes that are essentially about the inside of Nicole's head. The episodes do not announce themselves as such. They are technically about other things. But the center of them is Nicole, in her own thoughts, in her own pressure, in her own fatigue, doing the small work of holding her life together for one more day. The show treats these episodes with the same warmth it treats its other character studies. But the difference, in Nicole's case, is that the warmth is, by the end of the episode, not entirely a comfort. You can be warm toward a person and still know that the person is going to wake up tomorrow and do the same impossible work all over again, and the show is honest about that. Nicole, by the end of her own episodes, has not been freed. Nicole has been seen. Sometimes the seeing is the closest thing the show can offer her to a happy ending. And the show is honest that it is not, in fact, a happy ending. It is just the next morning, with someone in the room finally aware of what the morning is going to ask of her. The handful of Halloween episodes the show produced are another small place where it allowed itself to lean fully into the texture it had been building. Elmore, on Halloween, is, in the show's framing, a town in which the standard boundaries between the living and the dead become thinner than they already are. The episodes are full of small, beautifully rendered horror imagery, treated with the same casual matter-of-factness as everything else in the show. Ghosts walk down the street, strange figures cross the lawns. The neighbors stay inside with the lights off. The children, in costume, walk through it all, without ever quite acknowledging that the costumes are not the scariest thing on the street. The show does this with a kind of confident, knowing tone, and the result is some of the most genuinely unsettling sequences any cartoon of this kind has produced. The horror is gentle. The horror is present. The horror is not used to frighten the children watching the show. The horror is used to ambiently remind everyone that the world the show is set in has always had this in it, and that the Halloween episodes are not introducing anything new. They are just turning up the brightness on what has been there the whole time. There are also, in the long catalog of the show's episodes, a handful that are genuinely difficult to watch on rewatch because of how directly they treat the question of what time does to people. There is an episode that contemplates, very seriously, what the characters of the show would look like as adults. The flash-forwards in that episode are handled with a real awareness that the children watching are also going to grow up, and that the adults watching are also already grown up, and that the question of who you are going to become is, for everyone in the audience, an open and slightly painful one. The show, in that episode, lets each of its main characters be glimpsed in a possible adulthood, and the possible adulthoods are, in most cases, neither tragedies nor triumphs. They are the kind of adulthoods that people actually live, smaller than the children expected and bigger than the children feared, and full of the kind of small daily compromises that the children watching the show will, in their own turn, also be making by the time they are the same age. The show does not, in that episode, promise anyone a shining future. The show does not, in that episode, threaten anyone with a ruined one. The show just lets the future be what the future is, which is to say, mostly, like the present, only later. These episodes, taken together, are the show at its most adult, in the sense that adulthood is, in part, the slow acceptance that the world is not going to become very different from the world you currently live in, and that the most important work of your life is going to be the work of finding small pieces of warmth inside a frame that does not, on its own, supply much warmth. The show is not pessimistic about this. The show is, throughout, generous and warm and full of small moments of joy. But the show is honest that the warmth is going to have to be supplied by the people in the room, and that the people in the room are tired, and that the work of supplying warmth every day, in a world that does not make it easy, is the work that the show is, at its center, actually about. That is the work the Wattersons keep doing, episode after episode. That is the work the side characters keep doing, in their own smaller ways, behind the leads. That is the work the show itself is doing, in its own production, with its mixed media leftovers and its overworked animators, and its modest budget, and its long, ambitious run. The show is, at every level, a small effort to make warmth out of materials that, on their own, would not be warm. The show is, at every level, the kind of work that has to keep being done forever, by everyone in the room, or the warmth goes out. That is the deepest darkness the show contains, and it is also, in the same moment, the deepest comfort. The warmth is not given. The warmth is made. The making is constant. The making is what we are doing, right now, by paying attention to it. There is one last thread worth pulling before we begin to land, and it is the small, ongoing question of what the show actually thinks about the future. Not the future of its plot, the future of its characters' lives, the future, by implication, of the audience watching. The show has been, for 6 seasons, very honest about how hard things are. The show has been, for 6 seasons, very generous about how much love is possible inside the hard things. The question of what comes next, of what the long arc of any of these lives is going to look like, is one that the show has, mostly, declined to answer directly. The Inquisition froze the answer in midair. The continuation, in whatever form it takes, will probably do its best to thaw the answer back out. In the meantime, the answer is held in the small details of the episodes the show did get to make. The show does, in passing, glimpse the future of its characters in a small handful of moments. There are flash forwards, there are dream sequences, there are alternate timelines, accessed by various small magical or technological accidents. In almost all of these, the futures the show glimpses are, as we have already said, neither shining nor ruined. They are, in nearly every case, the kind of futures in which the characters are recognizably themselves, only older, and only a little more tired, and only a little more aware of how their lives have shaped up. Gumball, in these futures, is sometimes a married adult, sometimes a single one, sometimes a successful one, in a small way, sometimes not. Darwin, in these futures, is usually still close to his brother. Anais, in these futures, is usually doing the kind of work that her early intelligence had promised, only without quite the level of acclaim that her early intelligence had seemed to indicate. Nicole and Richard, in these futures, are, in nearly every case, still together, still in the same house, still in the same chairs. A little older, a little softer, a little less raw. There is something quietly truthful about this. Most of us, when we are children, imagine that adulthood will be very different from childhood. Most of us, when we get to adulthood, find that adulthood is not, in fact, very different from childhood. It is just larger and slower and with fewer easy outs. The show, in glimpsing the futures of its characters, lets that truth land without ever saying it out loud. The Wattersons are not going to be magical adults. They are going to be the adults their childhood set them up to be, doing their best inside the limits their childhoods left them. The show is okay with that. The show, in a way, is making the case that this is enough, that doing your best inside your limits, with the people you love, in the small town you happen to be in, is not a small life. That it is, in fact, the only life there is. That the alternative, the shining, transformed adulthood, is mostly a fiction we tell ourselves to keep moving. And that the actual work of being a person is the work of finding the love and the warmth and the meaning inside the frame you are actually living in. The darkness of the show, in the end, is the darkness of that recognition. There is no shining future coming for the Wattersons. There is no shining future coming for the children of Elmore. There is no shining future coming for the audience watching the show. The town will continue to be the town. The school will continue to be the school. The factory where Nicole works will continue to be a factory where someone has to work. The houses next door will continue to contain unhappy marriages and tired adults and quiet rooms. The patterns from the previous generation will continue to pass to the next. The void will continue to receive the forgotten. The Inquisition will, in some form, continue to come around for the strange. None of this is going to be magically lifted. What the show offers, against all of that, is the small, ongoing fact of attention. The fact that we can, if we choose, keep looking at each other. The fact that we can, if we choose, keep being soft with the people in our houses. The fact that we can, if we choose, keep refusing to file the strange away. The fact that the warmth is not given, but that the warmth, every day, in every house, can be made and remade and made again by people willing to do the small daily work of making it. The show is, throughout its 6 seasons, a sustained argument for that work. The work is not glamorous. The work is not heroic. The work is small and constant and unrewarded. The work is the only thing the show really believes in. And the work is, in the end, what the show is asking you to do, in your own life, with your own people, after you have finished watching. This is, in the simplest possible terms, why the show is darker than you remember and warmer than you remember at the same time. You remembered the colors. You remembered the noise. You remembered the speed. You remembered the gags. You did not, on first watch, remember the small, steady weight underneath all of it. The small, steady weight was always there. The small, steady weight is what gives the colors their charge. The small, steady weight is the reason the show, on rewatch, hits in places it did not hit before. The show has been, the whole time, doing 2 things at once. The cartoon you were watching was a cartoon. The cartoon underneath it was a meditation. Both are true. Both were, for years, frozen in midair, on the edge of the cliff, waiting for the continuation to drop them, gently, back into motion. When the continuation does land in its fullest shape, the show will get to finish a sentence it stopped years short of finishing. The Wattersons will be allowed to fall off the cliff and land. The Inquisition will be allowed to be resolved or not resolved or partially resolved in some surprising way. The town will be allowed to keep moving forward, or to keep losing pieces of itself, or to settle into some new shape we cannot, from this side of the pause, quite predict. Whatever happens, the show that gets made on the other side of the pause is going to carry, into the new work, everything we have spent tonight talking about. The void will still be there. The Inquisition's logic will still be there. The Robinsons next door will still be there. The factory will still be there. The school will still be there. The small, steady weight will still be there. And the response to it, on the show's part, will still, I suspect, be the same response. Look at it. Name it. Refuse to let it file you away. So that is, more or less, the small map of the show. The void in the white. The Inquisition at the door. The factory at the end of the street. The house next door with the lights down. The school down the road. The quiet hospital. The dying mall. The small pink house in the middle of all of it, with the family inside doing their best, and their best being, on most days, just barely enough. The colors on top of all of it, the noise on top of all of it, the mixed media, the fast cuts, the visual gags, the blue cat at the center of the frame, doing his best to not look at any of the heavier things directly, and the show, around him, looking at them anyway, very patiently, in the background of every shot. The amazing world of Gumball is, when you slow down and let it be what it actually is, one of the more honest portraits of small-town Western life in the last 2 decades of children's animation. It happens to be funny. It happens to be visually inventive. It happens to be loud and fast and full of inventive nonsense. But underneath all of that, it has been, the whole time, a quiet, patient, sad, small, generous show about a small, tired family in a small, tired town, holding on to each other, mostly by their fingertips, mostly without complaining about it, mostly without ever quite naming what they are holding on against. The show, in showing you all of that, has been asking you to look at the people in your own life, in your own town, in your own house, the same way. To recognize their small tiredness, to recognize their small love, to make a small effort, where you can, to keep them out of the void, to keep them out of the Inquisition's clipboard, to keep them from being filed away by a world that, on its own, has very little time for the strange and the small. If you have watched this show as a child, the show was telling you, the whole time, that the warmth in your house was made by your parents, and that the warmth was worth being grateful for, and that the warmth was not promised to anyone. If you are watching the show now as an adult, the show is telling you, this time, that the warmth in your house is yours to make, and that the making is constant, and that the work is small and steady and unglamorous, and the only work worth doing. The show meets you wherever you are. It does this in the body of a cartoon about a blue cat. It is, by any honest measure, a small, quiet masterpiece, dressed up as a children's comedy, hiding in plain sight on a Saturday morning network, waiting, the whole time, for the people watching to grow up enough to notice what it has been doing. And if you have made it to this part of the script, awake or half awake, in the soft light of whatever room you are in tonight, I hope what you have heard here gives you the same small feeling I get when I sit with this show, which is, more than anything, that the world is heavy, but the heaviness is not the whole of the world. There are small pink houses on small streets in small towns full of small lives that are, in their own quiet way, doing the work. There are people in those houses paying attention to each other. There are blue cats and goldfish brothers and pink rabbit sisters and tired mothers and overgrown fathers, in their thousands, in their millions, in the actual world outside this video, going about the small daily business of refusing to let each other be forgotten. The show is just one way of looking at it. There are many. I will say this last thing and then I will let you sleep. The Wattersons were, for years, frozen on that cliff. They have, by most accounts, finally been allowed to move again, at least in part, on the other side of a long pause. When the rest of the story arrives, in whatever shape it takes, a new generation of children will get to discover them for the first time, and the old generation will get to see how the story they grew up with finally lands. Until the last of it has arrived, the small pink house on the quiet street is, in some corner of the imagination, still waiting. The little blue cat at the center of the frame is still waiting. The girl with the broken shell is still waiting. The ghost in the wall is still waiting. The town is still waiting. The void is still waiting. And we, on this side of the screen, in our own houses, in our own towns, with our own families, are waiting too, which is, in a way, the most honest thing the show could possibly leave us with. We are all, always, in some form, waiting for the next chapter. The show has just been generous enough to let us see what waiting looks like, from inside a small, soft pink house, with the people we love asleep in the rooms around us, and the lights down, and the quiet of the night settling in over everything. Thank you for sitting with me tonight. Thank you for being one of the people who looked. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.